Before time drew its first border, before the desert traded in legends, there stood places older than memory itself, cities carved of sunlit stone, temples sealed by silence, and waters that spoke in riddles. You step through shifting sands where wind unearths fragments of a forgotten world, feeling the weight of stories that chose to vanish rather than be told. Here, beneath a sky that remembers every secret, each breath hums with the pulse of vanished gods and hidden rites. Listen, the key. Earth still murmurs truths science cannot name, truths waiting for someone to wander soft enough to hear. You step into the endless sea of dunes at dawn, when the desert is neither cold nor fiercely bright, but suspended in a pale whisper of rose and gold. Each grain of sand shifts beneath your sandals like the slow turning of an hourglass, and you feel, somewhere beneath your ribs, the gentle pulse of memories older than mapmakers. Here, in the heart of the Rub al-Khali, names dissolve. Ubar, Iram, Sheba. Each is only a shadow in the wind, and each shadow leads you deeper into silence. The air hangs thick with secrets. Beneath the surface of this sun-scorched sea, there once lay streets paved with white stone and markets hung with tapestries dyed in colors now lost to time. You imagine caravans of traders guided by stars that have since vanished from our skies. They followed invisible lines, drawing the outlines of a world we no longer recognize. Their footprints have long been swallowed by the shifting sands, but in this moment, you feel their weight in the warmth against your souls. A stray breeze stirs, and for a heartbeat the sands part to reveal fragments of pottery, ceramic shards, painted with delicate geometric patterns, so precise they look as though the wind itself arranged them. You crouch, tracing your fingers over the cool curves of clay. The designs, zigzagging lines, concentric circles, tiny triangles, speak in a language you almost understand. This was not mere ornamentation, but a code. The pottery belonged to keepers of knowledge, those who measured time not in hours, but in cycles of light and shadow. You stand and continue east, where the dunes unfurl like rolling waves, each crest hiding another secret. The horizon is a pale haze, yet you sense something solid waiting. Pillars half buried in sand, columns carved from stone so hard it defies centuries of erosion. They rise like silent sentinels, lined in perfect alignment to capture the first rays of sunrise. You pause at the base of one column, its surface etched with weathered reliefs. A procession of robed figures carrying lamps, bows and arrows, and strange lotus-shaped vessels. Who were they, these figures frozen in stone? Pilgrims? Priests? Guardians of a truth too heavy for memory? As the sun climbs higher, the heat ripples against your skin, but you feel no thirst. Instead, you taste the faint tang of ancient incense. On the breeze, myrrh perhaps burned in rituals meant to coax the desert spirit into speech. You close your eyes and inhale deeply, letting the scent settle into your lungs. For a moment, the world shifts. You hear distant chanting, the slow beat of drums, the rustle of silk robes moving in unison. The chant is neither melody nor language. You've heard but an echo of something primordial, a lullaby for a land unclaimed by empires. Opening your eyes, you find the chanting gone, replaced by the desert's hush, a soft susurration of moving sand. In that hush, you discern a pattern. No two dunes are alike, yet together they form an unwritten map. Are you following this map, or is it carrying you? You can no longer tell. You wander until the day stretches its full length until the sun begins to tip toward the west, turning sky and sand to molten gold. Then far off on the horizon you see the silhouette of a structure that should not exist here, a gateway of two massive stones joined by a lintel carved into the likeness of a crescent moon cradling a star. No records speak of this gateway, no scholar has set foot in this place. Yet here it is, standing like a silent promise. You approach reverently, brushing away sand from the threshold until you feel the cool touch of stone beneath your fingertips. The carvings are fresh, as if cut yesterday. Birds in flight, serpents coiled in eternal embrace, and symbols that pulse with a subtle inner light you can almost see. You realize then that this gateway is not merely an entrance, but a testament that some civilizations chose to vanish not in defeat, but in deliberate concealment, guarding their greatest wonders from the eyes of the unworthy. You step between the stones. The world tilts, the light softens, and you hear the desert breathe. In this moment, you do not walk forward, you awaken. The dunes' roar softens behind you, and as dust settles on stones unseen, you follow a path of starlight carving furrows in rock toward temples whose names never reached our lips. The dunes' roar softens behind you, and as dust settles on stones unseen, you follow a path of starlight carving furrows in rock toward temples whose names never reached our lips. You climb the narrow path carved into crimson cliffs, each step echoing against the stone like a heartbeat. The air here is cool and thin, far from the desert's fiery breath, yet it carries a faint tang of salt and dust, as if the sea has secret corridors reaching inland. Beneath your feet, rock slides of ochre and rose converge in layered bands, each stripe a silent chronicle of eras you cannot name. You pause at a natural alcove, stretching your arms wide to touch the warm stone wall, feeling its resonant hum as if history itself pulses beneath the surface. Before you lie the ruins of a temple carved into the living rock. No grand columns. Soaring overhead, no inscriptions declaring its patron deities, only smooth walls and vast empty chambers that seem to breathe. You step through the archway hewn from solid stone, and immediately the world falls quiet. No wind, no bird, only the gentle drip of condensation falling from a distant stalactite. Light from the canyon's rim slips in as a single, slender beam, illuminating a dusty floor where footprints have long since faded. You trace your fingertips along the walls. In places, the stone is polished to a soft sheen by the passage of countless hands, pilgrims who came for reasons now lost, pressing their palms against the rock in supplication or awe. In other spots, the surface is rough, pocked with holes, drilled in patterns you cannot decipher. Were these sockets for wooden beams, places to hang relics, or perhaps openings to let prayers escape into hidden chambers behind the rock face? You imagine a temple not of bricks and mortar, but of sound and shadow, an amphitheater for voices raised in song or lament. Venturing deeper, you enter a vast chamber whose walls curve inward like the shell of a giant mollusk, the curve guiding sound toward a central platform. You stand upon this dais and whisper a single word, anything that comes to mind, and the echo returns to you, not as a copy, but as a softened hymn, layered with undertones of voices you never spoke. The reverberation stretches and fades like a ripple across still water, and you feel a tremor in your chest, as if the temple itself responds to your presence. Scattered across the floor are fragments of pottery and stone vessels stained with ochre and cinnabar. Each shard bears a trace of pigment, spirals of indigo, dots of chromium green, delicate bands of gold leaf. You kneel, gathering a fragment in your palm and turning it so that the light catches the glint of metal. The pigments speak of far away. Mines, copper from the mountains of Oman, lapis lazuli from the lofty peaks of Afghanistan, testaments to a network of trade routes that threaded this temple into the wider world. Yet here, amid these exotic tinctures, no tablet explains why this place was sacred. Above you, carved reliefs run along a ledge just beyond arm's reach. Silhouettes of hooded figures bearing lanterns, serpents entwined around unseen pillars, and geometric patterns that shift between squares and circles as your eyes trace them. In one panel, a procession moves toward a sunken staircase. In another, a great bird stretches its wings against a background of stars. The motifs repeat with subtle variations, as though part of a grand code whispered across generations. Some cosmic message that only initiates could interpret. You close your eyes and allow the darkness to fill your vision. In the absence of light, thoughts take on texture and shape. You feel the weight of past rituals, the low chant of worshippers, the soft thrum of drums, the flicker of torchlight dancing on walls carved long before your kind learned to write. You imagine a priestess stepping forward, her robes trailing like water, raising a bowl of translucent liquid until it catches the torchlight, then tipping it so that the glowing liquid cascades over an altar, steaming in the cool air. The scent of myrrh and sandalwood would swirl upward, forming a shroud of incense that mingled with the dank breath of the earth. When you open your eyes, the dust motes drifting in pale shafts of light seem to hover, suspended in time. You take a slow, deliberate step forward, feeling the stone floor give just enough beneath your foot to remind you it is alive. Each mark in the rock, every scratch, groove, and indentation feels like a letter in an ancient alphabet that you are only beginning to recognize. At the far end of the chamber, a narrow passage leads upward. You climb the uneven steps, hand-carved and worn smooth, until you emerge onto a terrace where the canyon stretches before you like a great open book. Below, a dry riverbed snakes through palms and acacia, and beyond, the plateau peters out into sand and sky. The wind here carries a peculiar hush, an absence of sound so profound it feels like a presence. You sit on the edge of the terrace, legs dangling over the void, and let the silence settle around you. In that quiet, you realize that the temple's greatest secret is its anonymity. No name carved in stone, no tablet buried in rubble, only the sheer magnitude of human devotion etched into rock. It is a place that resists definition, as if to protect its purpose from the defiling touch of conquest or fame. Rising, you trace the rim of the terrace until your gaze falls upon another cliff face opposite. There, carved high above, is a second temple, its entrance half occluded by centuries of rockfall. You marvel at the precision of its construction, straight lines cut into the cliff, perfect right angles that defy the chaos of nature. How did these builders measure and mark without tools you recognize? How did they summon the vision to transform living rock into halls of worship? You descend into the canyon and walk the narrow valley floor, passing between the two temples. As if threading a needle, the ground is littered with fallen blocks and collapsed lintels, each piece waiting to be claimed by sand or wind. You kneel beside one such block and, using a flake of obsidian, scrape the surface to reveal a faint inscription beneath centuries of grime. The characters are not cuneiform, not hieroglyphic, but something entirely different, looping curves. interwoven with straight lines suggesting a syllabary unknown to historians. You breathe in the dust raised by your touch, tasting a bitterness that lingers on your tongue. Dusk gathers in the canyon, and shadows lengthen until the walls bleed into darkness. You light a small lantern, its flame flickering against the stone, and casting long, quivering shadows that make the ruins appear to breathe. You linger until the last light of day seeps away, and then you extinguish the lantern, letting the chamber go black. In the darkness, you hear a soft sigh, whether wind or memory you cannot tell, and you feel the temple exhale around you. When you emerge into the cool night air, the sky overhead is an ocean of stars. You lie back on the smooth stone of the canyon floor and watch as constellations wheel overhead, some old friends, some uncharted. You wonder if the builders of these nameless temples ever looked up and saw the same patterns, attributing to them myths that have since dissolved into silence. You stand at last, brushing sand from your clothing, and glance back at the twin temples carved into living rock. They offer no greetings, no warnings, only the quiet assurance that some places exist outside of history's ledger. They are sanctuaries for mysteries too fragile to endure explanation, preserved in anonymity, waiting for a traveler patient, enough to feel their meaning rather than read it. Let us follow the caravan trails, not for spices, but for secrets. Let us follow the caravan trails, not for spices, but for secrets. You enter the Kharif season in Dhofar as if stepping into a dream painted in silver and green. A fine drizzle falls around you, softening the desert's edges and coaxing life from the ancient frankincense groves. Each tree stands gnarled and timeless, its trunk scarred by centuries of sacred tapping, veins of resin still glistening like crystallized tears. You pause beneath a cobalt sky veiled in mist, the air heavy with the sweet, balsamic scent of resin drying on sun-warmed bark. Your fingers brush the scoured bark of 1,000-year-old Boswellia sacra. The grooves are dark and sticky, as though each scar conceals a memory of ritual, offerings burned at dawn, prayers whispered by Bedouin priests, caravans pausing here to gather the sacred gum before venturing into unknown sands. You close your eyes and inhale deeply. In that breath you taste smoke, pale, aromatic, faintly bitter, carrying the echo of fires lit at holy sites long since vanished. Around you, leaves tremble in the soft monsoon breeze, their motion like the infinite flutter of prayer flags. You imagine pilgrims of old trailing their fingers over these branches, collecting resin in goatskin pouches to send across the world, to Rome, to Greece, to every imperial altar that would burn it as the scent of divinity. They believed that frankincense was the language of gods, a bridge between earth and the heavens. And in this moment, as the mist parts to reveal distant hills, you feel how the trees speak in their own dialect of scent and shadow. Beside a shallow pool formed by last night's rains, you kneel. The water reflects a tangle of branches overhead, each droplet distorting the image like a prayer catcher's web. You dip a finger into the cool liquid and taste the phantom tang of resin, earth, and sky distilled in a single, trembling moment. The pool is more than water, it is a mirror that holds secrets. You see fleeting visions, caravans winding under starlit nights, priests chanting in a language untranslatable, shadows dancing against stone altars. Are these memories or dreams conjured by the sacred moisture? You cannot tell. Continuing deeper, into the grove, you encounter ruins of a low stone platform surrounded by basalt pillars carved with spiral motifs. These stones were once an altar where incense burned in bowls of clay, smoke rising like the breath of the earth. You trace the carved spirals with reverence, imagining them as maps of invisible currents, wind patterns that carried the scent. Across seas, celestial pathways linking temple to temple. Somewhere beyond these pillars lies a subterranean chamber where the air still tastes of resin and ritual. You follow a faint trail of resin deposits leading off the platform, each flake of amber gum a breadcrumb in the forest of memory. The path slopes downward toward a hidden ravine where mist pools like a silent congregation. Here, the trees grow tighter, branches woven overhead into a living canopy. Light filters through in fractured beams, illuminating patches of moss and lichen that cling to rock faces, their green glow intensified by the humid air. The hush around you is thicker than any silence you have known, a pregnant pause before revelation. At the ravine's heart, you discover the mouth of a cave, its entrance framed by pillars of living wood and stone. Inside, the air is cool and damp, smelling of earth and ancient water. You step forward, guided by the flicker of luminescent fungi clinging to the walls, tiny lanterns planted by a gardener's hand unseen. Further in, you find an altar carved directly from the living rock, a shallow basin filled with solidified resin, its surface cracked like a sun-baked lake. You run your palm over the resin's cool edge and feel the echo of countless offerings, myrrh from distant lands, herbs crushed for healing, prayers trapped in amber, slow to harden. In the stillness of the cave, you listen to your own breathing. Each inhale resonates in your chest like a drum. Each exhale carries the whisper of trees overhead. The cave is a womb of memory. The world outside seems distant, as though you stand between eras rather than landscapes. You imagine the priests who once knelt here, their words lost to time, their faith sealed in these dark walls. You wonder if they believed secrets could be buried where light could never reach, and if those secrets waited here still. Patient as stone, patient as resin waiting to crack open beneath the sun. Stepping back into daylight, the scent of frankincense greets you like an old friend. The air shimmers with droplets, turning each shaft of light into a prism of possibility. You gather a small piece of resin fallen at the cave's mouth, warm it between your fingers, and let its scent weave into your skin. It stays with you as you climb from the ravine, carried like a silent mantra in your blood. As you emerge from the incense grove, the mist begins to lift. The trees recede behind you, their outlines softening into the morning haze. Yet the grove's voice lingers in your mind, a low, resonant hum that threads through your thoughts, reminding you that some mysteries are lived more than solved. You walk away feeling both lighter and heavier. Lighter for having touched something sacred, heavier for the remembrance of what was lost in its making. The scent fades, but the memory of sacred fire lingers as your feet reach older soil. The scent fades, but the memory of sacred fire lingers as your feet reach older soil. You arrive at the edge of a vast plain where the earth seems to shimmer beneath an invisible heat, and there, rising from the dust like a question without an answer, stand slender pillars of dark basalt. They stretch skyward in perfect alignment, spaced at regular intervals as if marking the spine of a long-forgotten ritual highway. No eroded ruins surround them, no collapsed temples or toppled walls, just the pillars, silent and intact, defying every expectation you carry of decay and time. Each column is carved from a single block of volcanic stone, so uniform you wonder if they were quarried and moved by machines rather than human hands. Their surfaces bear no inscription, only vertical grooves that catch the slanted light, creating an illusion of movement. You step forward and let your hand glide over the cool stone. The grooves are too precise for crude tools, too straight for chisels wielded by mortal wrists. In that contact you feel the pull of something impossible, as though the pillars themselves are gravity wells that distort the world around them. You circle the formation, keeping the nearest pillar always at your left shoulder. The ground underfoot is compacted clay, unbroken by paths or animal tracks, suggesting that no one has walked here for centuries. Yet the tops of the pillars are crowned with bas-relief shapes, interlocking hexagons, concentric circles, and spirals that echo patterns found in distant cultures. You trace a spiral that begins wide at the base and tightens toward the top, as if guiding the eye. And, strangest of all, each groove seems to align with a different star at dusk. You tilt your head upward, but the daylight sky offers no clues. The patterns refuse to yield their secrets in sunshine. As the sun dips low, the pillars cast long, narrow shadows that form corridors of grey on the ochre plain. You walk between the columns, feeling yourself shrink in their presence, as though each pillar extols your insignificance. The air grows cooler, and a breeze stirs fine dust at your feet, bringing with it a faint murmur, like distant chanting, or perhaps the sigh of ancient stone shifting under an unseen weight. You pause, closing your eyes to listen. The murmur fades and returns, rhythmic, as though a chorus of voices is practicing beneath the earth itself. You follow the sound to a central pillar taller than the rest. Its base is flanked by two low stone benches arranged like seats for watchers. You sit, placing your palms on the bench's cool surface, and breathe in the quiet. The grooves of the central column here are deeper, wider, carved not by tools, but by some slow and deliberate process, as if the stone itself was coaxed into shape. When you lean in, you detect faint carvings at eye level, a row of symbols that remind you of no alphabet you know, half circles, nested triangles, vertical bars intersected by dots. You wonder if this is a code left by the builders to guide travelers, or a warning to those who wander too close. Night falls quickly on the plain. You light a small lamp and set it on one of the benches. The flame flickers against the pillars, revealing hidden angles and casting dancing shadows that seem to animate the grooves. In the lamplight you see, etched deep into the basalt, a scene, a procession of figures with elongated heads and spindly limbs, offering oblong objects to a being seated upon a raised dais. The object resembles a crystalline sphere cradled in hands. You strain to recall any myth or text that speaks of such a gift, but your memory is silent. You draw your lamp closer and hold it aloft, scanning the pillars around you. In the shifting glow, it appears that each pillar bears a fragment of the same scene, an invitation to read the narrative by walking the perimeter. You rise and begin the circuit, lamp in hand, feeling like an initiate tracing a clandestine scripture. The story unfolds. Figures arrive beneath a blood-red sky, place the spheres on pedestals, and vanish in a flash of light. In the final panel, the pedestals stand empty, but the pillars behind them glow with an inner luminescence. Your heart quickens. Could these pillars be more than mere monuments? Could they be conduits, activated by some unknown mechanism? You whisper aloud, "What were you waiting for?" The pillars remain mute, but the air hums around you, vibrating in resonance with the basalt. You set the lamp down and press your ear against the central pillar's base. There, buried in the stone, you catch a faint thrum, almost musical, like a tone sustained just beyond the limits of human hearing. Compelled, you press your fingertips onto the grooves, following the spiral until it leads to a shallow depression. At shoulder height, you fit your hand into that hollow and feel warmth, unexpected warmth, flow through the stone into your palm. The lamp's flame quivers, and for a moment, the pillars seem to breathe with you. You step back, startled, as the basalt columns glow faintly at the tips, pulsing once, twice, then subsiding. You scramble to retrieve your lamp, but in that flicker you glimpse something rising above the pillars, a silhouette of wings unfurling, dissolving instantly into darkness. The world lies hushed, as though holding its breath. You stir the dust at your feet, watching motes dance in the lamplight, remembering that you are but a guest in this monument's domain. You collect your lamp and retreat to the plain's edge. As you walk away, the pillar's glow fades, returning the basalt to its somber grey. Yet in your mind the hum remains, the outline of wings etched into your vision. When you reach the horizon, the first sliver of moon gleams between clouds. You pause, turning back to see the pillars one last time. They stand as they did when you arrived, silent, unyielding, impossible. You offer them a silent bow, acknowledging that some wonders belong to the earth, not to memory or word. The stones recede behind you, yet their hum lingers, guiding your path toward rivers that ran backwards. The stones recede behind you, yet their hum lingers, guiding your path toward rivers that ran backwards. You enter the ancient floodplain just before dawn, where the Tigris and Euphrates once danced in graceful arcs, feeding life across Mesopotamia. Here, they say, the river reverses its course, an event so rare it earned the name Al-Nahr al-Ma'kus, the inverted river. Your footsteps disturb wet clay as you follow a shallow channel where water drifts against its own current, moving upstream as if remembering a path erased by time. The riverbank's reeds bend in silent acquiescence, their tips pointing inland, and you sense a subtle dissonance in the world beneath your feet. The air is cool, still heavy with the night's damp breath, and you kneel to cup the water in your palms. It is neither icy nor warm, but holds a curious tension, as though every molecule resists its own flow. You lift the water to your lips and taste the faint tang of silt and salt, elements carried from distant hills, mixed in eddies that defy reason. For a moment, you wonder if this backward current is merely an illusion conjured by shadow and light. Yet as the sun peaks above the horizon, its golden rays reveal the truth. Here, water ungoes its journey, returning to origins long forgotten. You rise and trace the river's path upstream, where fallen columns half submerged like ancient monoliths mark the site of a once grand city. The submerged ruins glimmer beneath the surface, walls of mud brick coated in lime plaster, geometric mosaics that catch the dawn's gleam, and carved reliefs hinting at gods who commanded the river's mood. You press your hand against a fluted column and feel its resonance, ripples of disturbance, as if the stone remembers each time the water changed direction. What power shaped this reversal? Lightning, earthquake, or ritual so potent the river itself bowed to human will? Following the submerged street, you emerge upon an open plaza where a low pedestal stands midstream. Water swirls around its base, eddying in small whirlpools that spin in harmony against the tide. The pedestal once held a statue of Sumerian kings, whims of power embodied in stone. Now only its rough outline remains, worn but unyielding. You imagine priests circling this pedestal in ceremonial robes, chanting invocations to Ningal, guardian of waterways, beseeching her to tame the flood and reverse its wrath. You can hear their voices as a faint hum in your mind, a faint accompaniment to the river's anomalous song. On the far bank, steps carved into rock descend into a semi-submerged chamber. You cross with cautious steps, wet clay suctioning at your sandals. Each footfall is deliberate, measured against the river's strange rhythm. At the chamber's entrance, the water flows inward, then abruptly curves, guiding you into a cavern that breathes with ancient moisture. Stalactites drip, in measured cadence, echoing distant splashes, and you feel as if stepping into the throat of the world itself. The chamber walls glow with mineral veins, iron reds, copper greens, and streaks of white calcite, tracing the path of subterranean currents. Inside, the water flows over smooth stone floor, pooling beneath a ceremonial niche carved into the wall. You kneel at the niche and discover a shallow basin, its lips stamped with cuneiform script. The words speak of the day the river turned, an event tied to the reign of a forgotten ruler whose name has faded from all but this hidden text. You trace each symbol with a fingertip, feeling the grooves left by sharpened reeds. Though you cannot read the language, you sense its reverence. Water as lifeblood, water as danger, water as a living entity that can be guided, coaxed, even compelled to flow against its nature. You rise, water dripping from your sleeves, and follow the basin's edge to a narrow tunnel that leads deeper still. The passage walls close in, polished by centuries of moisture, until you emerge into a final chamber where the river's inverted stream begins. Here, a fissure in the rock arcs overhead, letting in a beam of sunlight that strikes a pool of crystalline water. The pool's surface is mirror-smooth, reflecting the fissure's jagged edges like a broken sky. Around its perimeter, carvings depict a procession of figures carrying vessels, pouring water into the river's mouth as if feeding a great beast. You stand at the threshold and listen. The sound is paradoxical. Water that should flow downstream rises in a quiet susurration, climbing the tunnel with a soft insistence. You press your palm to the pool's edge and feel warmth pulsing beneath the stone, an echo of rituals conducted here when the world was young. The basin's carvings hint at a bargain made between mortals and gods, water given in sacrifice in exchange for bounty, the river's course swapped in compensation for life. This cavern, you realize, is the altar of that pact, and each reversed current is a reminder of promises carved in rock. A breeze stirs at your back, carrying the faint scent of date palms and saffron, aromas from distant orchards that once thrived along the river's banks. You close your eyes and let the scents weave into your memory, imagining lush groves where Romans planted bridges of wood and caravans paused at oases to rest beneath vines heavy with fruit. You hear music, lyres plucked in rhythmic patterns, voices raised in hymns praising the river's generosity. Yet beneath the melody lies an undercurrent of tension, a hymn for a force that can reverse its flow at will. Dusk approaches as you retrace your steps through the tunnel, following the inverted river back into open air. At the cave's mouth, you pause to watch evening stars awaken above the floodplain. The river's surface glints with their reflections, dancing backward toward hidden springs. You realize the journey you witness is not merely physical, but temporal. water moving away from the future and into the past, carrying present secrets to ancient origins. You step onto the soft bank and let the current tug at your feet, guiding you downstream. The world seems to shift around you. Palm groves appear where none grew before, stone pillars emerge from the clay, and distant minarets fade into shimmering mirages. For a moment you question whether you leave this place transformed, or whether the place itself transforms around you, reshaping history to fit its own narrative. When you finally lift your gaze from the river, the cave entrance is gone, sealed by rockfall and time. Only the inverted flow remains as proof that you passed through a threshold. You gather a handful of water, tasting its paradox one last time, and let it slip through your fingers into the current. It disappears upstream, as silent as a whisper. You rise with the weight of unseen currents in your bones and the hum of ancient bargains in your ears. The air cools as night settles, and you feel the river's heartbeat beneath your feet, steady, resolute, unbroken by logic or expectation. You walk away from its banks, guided by the backward flow, carrying with you a fragment of this river's mystery, a story that belongs neither to past nor future, but to the eternal now. Follow the current now, not of water, but of voices calling through stone. You enter the dig site at Nineveh just before sunrise, when the ruins lie in a hush of pale pink and violet light. The earth here is stained dark with ash, as if someone spilled the world's grief over these stones. Beneath your boots, fragments of clay tablets crunch like brittle leaves in autumn. Each shard bears traces of cuneiform, telltale impressions of reeds pressed into damp clay, yet almost every line has been warped by flame, the edges curled and blackened. You bend to lift one fragment, feeling its heat-fossilized weight against your palm, and imagine the stories it once held, myths of creation, star charts mapping unknown heavens, laws that bound societies together. The air tastes faintly of smoke, though the pyre that consumed these libraries burned 3 millennia ago. You follow a narrow trench cut into the burned earth, where archaeologists have peeled back layers of rubble to reveal a collapsed archive chamber. Above you, remnants of carved stone archways jut from the ground, half-buried ribs of an ancient whale. These arches once supported vaults of knowledge in a building grand enough to rival palaces, yet today they are silent, emptied of scrolls, tablets, and tomes. The silence here is not absence, but a dense presence, heavy as molten lead, set to cool. As you step into the chamber's mouth, the ground slopes downward, guiding you into twilight where dust motes drift like embers in an unseen fire. You extend a hand and let the fine ash coat your fingertips, soft, powdery, a memory made tactile. In the dim light, you see rows of low benches carved from gypsum, arranged as though for scribes leaning over their work. You imagine them seated. Here, quills in hand, haloed by oil lamps whose flames danced against the walls. Their voices would have been low, rustle of papyrus, scrape of stylus, sighs of concentration. All of that has turned to dust. Deeper in, you find a raised platform, bordered by fallen pillars. This was once the central dais where the king himself might have studied the texts that underpinned his power, the omens predicting wars, indulgences for marital disputes, even recipes for dye and incense. The platform's edge is scorched, the carvings of winged bulls and floral motifs warped by heat. You trace one such creature's hoofprint with a fingertip, feeling the depression that centuries of flames scored into the stone. Here, the very iconography of divine protection became fuel for the conflagration. A narrow corridor leads away from the dais towards sealed niches. You crouch to peer inside one and find a mosaic of tablet fragments, jigsaw pieces of clay that once formed tablets of every size. Some are no larger than your palm, inscribed with lullabies for newborn royals. Others span wider than your shoulders, detailing astronomical observations that predate Greek stargazers. Flames reduce them all to patchworks of charcoal and ceramic, yet the prisms of meaning remain. You marvel at the resilience of these shards. Though broken, they still bear witness. You gather a few fragments into your satchel, careful not to jostle them. Each carries the echo of languages lost, voices that once spoke of gods, seasons, and the human heart. You flood your memory with the shapes of wedges pressed into clay. 3 short strokes for water, a triangle crowned by a dot for star, a spiral for wind. Even in their brokenness, the symbols pulse with intent. You imagine a scribe kneeling here, mixing clay with water drawn from the Tigris, forming each tablet by hand, imprinting knowledge before the sun rose. That craft feels closer now than the world above. At the far end of the chamber, you discover a sealed door carved of basalt. Its reliefs depict a library to end all libraries, walls lined with scroll racks, shelves heaped with leather-bound codices, and scholars moving in reverent procession. The door's surface is marred by blast marks, circular pockmarks likely caused by collapsing beams catching fire and exploding embers into the stone. You press your palm to the cool basalt and feel nothing but stillness, as if the building itself holds its breath in mourning. You light a small lantern and set it on the floor, its flame trembling against the door's surface. In the glow, the reliefs shimmer with half-remembered life. You imagine opening this door and stepping into a hall of mirrors, each reflecting a facet of human thought, medicine and metaphysics, poetry and prophecy, geometry and genealogy. In that moment, you realize the library was more than a collection. It was a crucible where ideas forged the very essence of civilization. Then the fire came, and all that remained were echoes trapped in clay. You study the reliefs until the lantern guttering sends the chamber into deeper shadow. Stray sparks drift from the lintel above, flaring briefly against the blackness before extinguishing. You rise and push gently on the door. It shifts inward with a groan that sounds like a lament. A draught from within carries the faint fragrance of papyrus and oil, 2 smells that should not exist here. Your heart quickens. Does this chamber truly remain sealed, or is it a gateway to a memory that refuses to die? You squeeze between door and frame, entering a space too dark to see. You hold the lantern high, revealing row upon row of stone niches, empty sockets where scrolls once rolled. Each niche is numbered in delicate cuneiform, suggesting an organizational system as precise as any modern library. You recall stories of the king's scholars cross-referencing texts by subject and date, creating index tablets to locate wisdom in an instant. The system worked until the fire came, and now the niches stand as empty boxes in a puzzle missing its pieces. You walk slowly down the aisle, brushing your fingertips along the lips of each niche, feeling the groove where leather bindings once rested. As you pass, you hear a soft clink, a falling shard of clay. You spin, lantern held aloft, and catch sight of a single tablet fragment tumbling to the floor. You retrieve it. On one side, you see the tail end of a lamentation poem invoking rain to end a famine. On the other, a plea for mercy in a land ravaged by drought. You cradle the shard against your chest, thinking of the poet whose words were lost, yet found you instead. Stepping back into the corridor, you carry that fragment like a flicker of flame resisting extinction. You follow a flight of uneven steps, upward, emerging onto the burned courtyard above. The sky here is a prism of dawn, golden on the horizon, fading into sapphire overhead. You lay the shard on a flat stone and watch as the light illuminates the smudged script, making the words shimmer with renewed urgency. You realize that fire, for all its devastation, preserved this place in ash. Without it, wind and rain would have scattered the fragments to oblivion. Instead, the conflagration sealed the knowledge beneath a protective mantle. Ash has become armor, shielding these remnants from time's gentle erosion. You feel the paradox that some truths must be consumed to endure. You gather your lantern and the remaining fragments, bowing to the silent arches as you depart. The chamber's hush follows you out, settling like dust in your lungs. Outside, the temperature rises as the sun ascends. You clutch the shard to your heart, carrying its story into the waking world. From fire to salt, we move to the city that refused to die. You arrive at the marshy fringes of ancient Eridu just as pale light settles over its silty canals. Reeds sway in gentle currents, their tips brushing the mirrored water in stately rhythm. Each ripple cascades across the surface like a sigh, carrying whispers of a city older than cities, claimed by no empire, remembered by no scholar, yet pulsing with spectral life. You step onto the worn plank of a boat dock, its wood soft with age, and push off into the haze. The boat glides silently, guided by unseen hands, along canals lined with broken ziggurats half buried in mud. Their tapering tiers, once reaching, toward the heavens, now slump like tired sentinels. You lean forward, tracing cracked limestone reliefs etched with horned deities and winding rivers. In each fissure lives water and memory, coalescing into a breath that seems to rise from the stones themselves. Here, the air is thick with ancient murmurs. You close your eyes and listen. A low drumbeat echoing in vaulted halls, the distant clink of bronze tools shaping clay, voices chanting hymns to Enki, lord of freshwater. The sounds swirl through the damp air and vanish, leaving only your own heartbeat pressing against your ribs. You inhale the brackish scent of reeds and open water, feeling the city's pulse sync with your own. As the sun lifts, shafts of light pierce the mist, illuminating patches of water lilies floating like spectral lanterns. Their pale petals unfurl in slow tribute to dawn. You reach out and touch one. Its petal yields under your finger, releasing a faint fragrance of honey and ancient wet stone. You imagine priests gathering these flowers at first light, weaving them into garlands offered to the river god, entreating him to bless the land with fish and fertility. The canal bends, revealing a cluster of reed dwellings built upon mud brick platforms. Many have collapsed, their thatched roofs caved in like open mouths, yet some stand tenuous bridges between past and present. You climb a narrow ladder and enter one such hut. Inside, the floor is strewn with pottery shards engraved with fish and water scroll motifs. You kneel, arranging fragments like pieces of a puzzle, and sense the presence of those who shaped them, hands inked with clay, eyes fixed on the currents that sustained their world. Outside, sunlight intensifies, burning off the morning mist. You return to your boat and drift toward the great ziggurat, its base submerged in shallow water. From here, its tiers ascend in a stepped silhouette against the sky. Per legend, Eridu was the first city raised by gods, not by mortal toil alone. The ziggurat stood at the world's axis, linking earth and water, heaven and humanity. Now it remains as a ruin breathing in fractured rhythms. You disembark and wade through knee-deep water to the base of the ziggurat. Each step yields a suctioned pull, as though the city resists your approach. You place a hand on the stone, cool, damp, receptive, and feel tiny tremors ripple back. The stone seems alive, as if vibrating with ancestral memory. You trace the carved foot of a deity, worn smooth by offerings pressed into its crevices. Oil, grain, fish scales. Offerings meant to keep the waters flowing, to honor the spirits that enfolded this place. Higher up, you find a niche where water dripped in perpetual blessing. Carved channels once guided sacred flow to a central pool. You cup your hands under a trickle seeping from above and let the water run down your palms. It tastes faintly of salt and peat, marsh and tears intertwined. You realize that the city long ago surrendered to rising waters, its stones claimed by the marsh rather than destroyed by conquest. In ruin, it lives on as an underwater archive of devotion. Climbing the first tier, you discover inscriptions etched on protruding blocks half submerged in mud. They speak of kings and sages who sought the fountain of life beneath the ziggurat's core. You press your ear to the lowest inscription and hear the muffled resonance of water coursing through hidden canals. Beneath the city lies a labyrinth of channels and cisterns engineered to collect floodwaters and dispense them in ritual cadence. Civilization itself was woven from this dance of give and take. On the second tier, the mist clears, revealing distant silhouettes of date palm groves and distant hills. The world seems both vast and intimate. From this height, you sense the city's blueprint, canals branching like veins, connecting dwellings to the ziggurat at the heart. You imagine Eridu as a living organism, every breath of wind and current, of water vital to its pulse. You feel yourself part of that organism, treading steps once trodden by a procession of supplicants. At the summit, you find a shallow basin carved into limestone. It once held holy water directed from the Euphrates, symbolizing the fusion of divine and natural realms. You peer into the basin and see your reflection fractured by ripples. Your face appears among ghostly imprints, crowns of reeds, smudges of clay, traces of ceremonial paint. The basin does not reflect only you, but generations who knelt here, gazing into the same water, seeking visions of gods. As you watch, a breeze stirs, rippling the basin's surface. The reflection shifts, and for a heartbeat you glimpse figures. In ceremonial garb, robes trailing beneath the water, faces obscured by masks of alabaster. They rise from the basin and step toward you, offering jars of perfumed oil and bowls of translucent resin. Then the vision collapses like a candle guttering in wind, and you are alone again with dawn's quiet glow. You descend the ziggurat, each tier echoing your passage. The marsh welcomes you back, reeds bowing gently as you pass. On the lowest level you find a small clay figurine half buried in silt, a mother goddess cradling a child. Her features are worn but serene, a testament to the city's nurturing spirit. You gather her in your palm, feeling her stillness, her patience. She is a reminder that even in ruin, life endures. Returning to your boat, you slide onto its polished wood and let the current carry you away. The canals narrow into silent passages beneath hanging vines, their leaves dripping dew. Each drop plunks into the water like a note in an unending composition. You close your eyes and hum along, entrained by the marsh's lullaby. Emerging at the city's edge, you stand on terra firma for the first time since dawn. The sun has climbed higher, turning water to glass and casting the ziggurat's shadow like an invitation to look back. You turn away slowly, leaving the ghosts of Eridu to their vigil, feeling their presence settle softly into your bones. Let us step away from the earth and look toward the stars, as they once did. You stand on the crest of a barren plateau at twilight, where the sky blooms in indigo and violet, and an ocean of stars emerges beyond human reckoning. The wind carries fine dust beneath your feet, shifting in soft ripples like a silent tide. No city lights mar the horizon here, only endless darkness pierced by pinpoints of ancient fire. You draw a deep breath and feel the hush of millennia settle around you, as though you have awakened in the universe's most secret chamber. Before you lay stone benches arranged in a circle, weathered by time yet oddly precise in their alignment. They face a low, domed observatory carved from the bedrock, an open-air sanctuary where astronomers once studied the heavens in reverent silence. Crescent-shaped niches line its inner wall, each sized to hold a bronze star chart. Now all are empty, save for 8 that bear fragments of blackened scrolls. You approach one and gently lift the brittle remnant. It holds diagrams of constellations that shift like living creatures, their lines drawn in ink that still gleams under your fingertips. The visible constellations, Orion, Taurus, Pleiades, are familiar, yet among them lie shapes that defy classification, clusters that curve into impossible geometries, stars connected by lines that form loops and spirals you have never learned. You trace the line between 2 points, feeling a peculiar warmth as your finger moves. It is as if the chart itself responds, pulsing faintly beneath the papyrus. You wonder if these were the forbidden stars, those deliberately omitted from official records by a scholar king who feared their power. Turning to the heavens, you identify the brightest stars by their ancient names, still sung in lullabies. Sirius, shimmering above the eastern ridge, Vega glimmering near the zenith. But as you search for the forbidden patterns, you find gaps, voids in the sky where no star burns. These vacant spaces align perfectly with the chart's spirals. You tilt your head, straining to see through the darkness, but find only empty air. Had the stars themselves been hidden? Or was the observatory built to honor lights long extinguished? A chill breeze rises, carrying the faint scent of burning oil. You follow it to a recessed altar at the observatory's center, a ring of black basalt polished smooth by hands long gone. In its center is a shallow bowl carved from alabaster, now stained gray. You kneel and peer inside. Residual traces of ash and powdered minerals remain, mingled in layers like geological strata. You scoop a fingertip into the ash and lift it to your nose. Smoke and night-blooming jasmine mingle, an aroma both intoxicating and mournful. You recall tales of a ritual known only to the high priests. Once, each generation, at the winter solstice, they burned a rare ink infused with meteorite dust, releasing cosmic secrets into the air. The smoke carried prayers and warnings to the heavens, and in return the hidden stars revealed themselves for a fleeting moment. Those who beheld them were said to gain wisdom beyond mortality, and also a burden too heavy for most to bear. Thus, the stars were censored, scratched from public charts, erased from temple walls, silenced by decree. Compelled, you gather some residue from the bowl and mix it with dew collected from the plateau's stones. You fashion a crude ink and dip your finger into its inky pool. As you draw a spiral on your palm, you feel a subtle shiver ripple through the air. The dust glitters briefly, then fades. You lift your hand, inspecting the spiral now etched in fine black lines against your skin. Your breath catches. Somewhere overhead, a faint shimmer flares as if a hidden star pierced through the sky's veil. You release a soft gasp, and the glow vanishes. The night returns to stillness, unbroken except for the distant cry of an owl. You look down at the spiral on your palm, half fading, half burning, with remembered light. This mark feels alive, rhythmic, pulsing quietly like a heartbeat. You press your palm to your chest, aligning the spiral with your own pulse, and sense the convergence of body, earth, and sky in a single, tremulous moment. Rising, you circle the observatory's perimeter. At each niche, you lay a thin thread of ink along the carved grooves, tracing loops, spirals, and unbroken circles until every fragment bears fresh lines. As you work, you feel the stone warm beneath your touch, as though inviting the forbidden patterns back into its memory. You step back and watch. By accident or ritual, the observatory seems to glow faintly, a halo of starlight igniting under your fingertips. Above you, the constellations shift imperceptibly. You notice a new cluster, a spiral of faint points swirling. Around a central void, it matches the spiral on your palm, the ones on the charts, and the ones carved in stone. You raise both arms, palms outward, as if receiving a gift. The stars tremble in their places, then steady, offering a subtle, unified pulse, a message in silence. You inhale, tasting the cold, thin air, and the hidden stars seem to whisper only one word: remember. Your heart tightens with a mixture of awe and sorrow. Knowledge is a burden that cannot be unlearned. Once the forbidden stars have shared their light, the world will never remain the same. You kneel at the altar and drop a tear into the alabaster bowl. The liquid sizzles faintly, in the ash releasing a wisp of silver smoke that drifts upward. You imagine the priests of old, lamenting the price of forbidden wisdom, burying their charts beneath barrage of sand and decree. Night deepens, and the final hour before dawn arrives. You stand and gather your traces of ink, smoothing them across the stone bench until no telltale marks remain, respecting the sacred anonymity of this place. Then you step back into the center, breathe deeply, and whisper your own prayer. May these truths remain gentle in their revelation, and may I carry their light without destroying its home. As the first pink thread of dawn weaves across the horizon, the observatory's glow fades, the forbidden stars retreat behind mortal sight, the hidden cluster dissolves into emptiness, and the spiral on your palm lifts like morning mist. You place your hand over your heart, feeling the echo of starlight still beating within you. The sky darkens, but something stirs below, beneath the hills of Anatolia. You awaken before dawn on a windswept plateau in southeastern Anatolia, where the first light paints the sky in lavender and ash. Beneath your feet lies Göbekli Tepe, a sanctuary older than agriculture, a ring of monolithic stones carved and raised by hands that knew neither writing nor wheel. Each pillar towers like a silent sentinel, their T-shaped forms bearing reliefs of beasts and symbols that gaze into emptiness. You step onto the uneven stone floor, fingertips brushing chipped carvings of foxes, scorpions, and serpents, creatures both familiar and uncanny. The air is thin and cold, carrying the faint bray of distant shepherds and the creak of wood against stone. You pause at the threshold of Circle A, where 12 pillars stand in concentric embrace. In the raw light, the stone surfaces glow pale gold, and you see for the first time how each pillar tilts slightly inward, as if conspiring with its neighbors. You walk the circumference slowly, letting your eyes trace the carved scenes. A boar charging toward an unseen foe, a humanoid figure with arms raised in invocation, abstract signs that pulse with meaning you cannot yet grasp. You press your palm against the nearest pillar. Its surface is coarse, flecked with pockmarks from millennia of weathering. Yet, where the carving remains, the depth of the relief is startling. Lines cut so cleanly that they look fresh, as if cut yesterday. You imagine the builders circling this stone in ritual, placing embedded chew sticks of flint at its base as they offered prayers to gods without names. Their voices must have echoed in this open air, resonating off neighboring pillars, creating an acoustic tapestry now silenced. By time, a stray breeze stirs, and you hear a faint scraping, rocks shifting, or perhaps the desert breathing. You close your eyes and listen, not a voice, but a sustained hush that seems to rise from the very ground. It is the silence of place made sacred, a quiet so deep it becomes a presence. You realize that these stones were never meant to speak. Their power lies in what they withhold, in the secrets they guard beneath layers of dust. Venturing deeper, you cross the plaza toward Circle B, where pillars stand half buried by earth and sediment. Each step you take dislodges a fine grain, sending tremors through the layered past. You crouch beside a fallen pillar, its base cracked in two by time's inexorable pressure. The relief here shows a scorpion, its pincers raised, tail curled in poised threat. You imagine that these carvings were warnings, barriers between worlds, guardians of threshold knowledge that no outsider was allowed to breach. Above Circle B looms the highest hillock, the Belly Hill, from which the site takes its name. You climb its slope, each footfall stirring ancient soil. At the crest, the panorama unfolds, circles of stone fanning out like ripples on still water. Beyond them, the plain stretches to distant ridges where dawn's color glows cold. You inhale the air, crisp, stinging pure, and feel an ache in your bones as though your body remembers living in this epoch before memory. You descend to Circle C, where a newly unearthed pillar shimmers with the promise of discovery. Archaeologists' brushes lie abandoned, dusting away layers of lows to reveal an intricate relief. A vulture with wings outstretched, clutching a human figure upside down. The scene is visceral, gruesome even, but also ritualistic, a tableau of death and transcendence. You crouch and peer into the carving, noting how the vulture's feathers are etched in minute detail, each barb distinct, each curve deliberate. This was no casual decoration, but a testament to beliefs you can only begin to fathom. You stand and circle the pillar, following the bird's gaze to a second carving, a pair of hands reaching upward, fingers splayed in silent yearning. The union of animal and human speaks of transformation, of a liminal state where flesh becomes spirit. You close your eyes, tracing the relief in your mind's eye, and feel a vertigo, a sense that the world you know dissolves at this threshold, that anything might unfold if you attune yourself to the stone's frequency. The sun climbs higher, gilding the plateau in gentle warmth. You leave Circle C and walk toward a cluster of smaller stones, often called the lion pillars, though their shapes are worn beyond clarity. Here, the builders assembled fragments of monoliths as if salvaging memories from a previous building. Each piece bears symbols that echo in pattern and meaning, yet none match exactly. You follow the mosaic of partial reliefs, piecing together narratives of conflict and communion, of prey and predator entwined in cosmic dance. You settle onto a low stone bench facing west, legs folded in meditation. Around you, the sight thrum fades into a soft hum, wind through grass, distant bleating, your own breath. In this stillness, time seems elastic. You extend your awareness to the pillars, imagining them awakening at dusk to realign with stars, long since shifted. Perhaps in a time before calendars, Göbekli Tepe marked not seasons, but rites of passage between life and death, earth and sky. A lark's song drifts across the stones, startling in its brightness. You follow the melody upward to the rim of the hillock. There, a solitary pillar stands alone, carved with a serpent winding around its shaft. Its scales almost shimmer in the sunlight, and you sense movement, as if the serpent might slide. Free and coil around your ankle, you crouch, studying each scale, each curve. The serpent is both guardian and gatekeeper, an emblem of hidden knowledge that demands respect. Kneeling, you trace the serpent's head where eyes would rest. The grooves are smooth here, polished by countless touches, pilgrims laying healing. Hands, seekers seeking sight. You close your eyes and lay your head against the pillar. The stone is cool, heart-like in its stillness. You breathe in unison with its inertia, letting your mind drift into murmurs of ancestral rites, fires lit at solstice, communal feasts in the circle's center, chants rising like smoke into night's dome. When you rise, you carry with you the silence of Göbekli Tepe, a silence deep as memory and sharp as revelation. You circle once more, pausing at each pillar to bow your head in gratitude. This place does not offer answers. It offers the privileging of wonder over comprehension. You understand that to know these stones is not to solve their mystery, but to hold it gently, as one holds a flame in cupped hands. You step to the edge of the site, where a faint path leads toward a sudden cliff. There, the shale rock is etched with traces of fires built long ago, where ancestors once watched the circles burn in embers of ceremony. The cliff's face is uncarved but speaks in texture. Layers of rock folded like pages in a book, each stratum a verse in Earth's own epic. You imagine the stones of Göbekli Tepe quarrying from here, carried piece by piece to the summit, a testament of faith and labor beyond reckoning. You stand on the precipice, wind tugging at your clothing, and gaze back at the circles. The pillars gleam like unblinking eyes in the plateau's heart. You inhale the air, tasting dust and hope, and whisper a farewell that reverberates among the stones. Then, turning eastward, you descend the path toward a new horizon, where the earth itself yawns open, promising further mysteries beneath its surface. As the stones fall silent, the earth opens beneath your feet. You follow the whisper of wind-carved canyons to Wadi Rum's threshold, where sandstone walls blush in crimson and gold as the sun leans low. Here, in a hidden ravine of Jordan's desert, lies an entrance half swallowed by dunes, a dark moor. In Livingstone, you crouch to peer inside. The air breathes cool, carrying the faint echo of dripping water. With a steadying breath, you step between jagged pillars of sandstone, and the world tilts. Daylight fades to amber gloom, and silence deepens as the chamber swallows footfalls. The tunnel slopes downward, lantern light dancing across walls carved, with swirling symbols, stars, crescents, and interlocked circles that echo the sky above. You run fingertips over these patterns, feeling their grooves pulse like the memory of the universe waiting beneath your skin. Each symbol seems both familiar and defiant, as if the ancients who inscribed them knew they would one day be dust, yet still left their hymns to stone. The walls close in until only your lantern's halo remains, and you listen to its glow. The drip, drip of water falling somewhere deeper, the hum of earth shifting in its slow rotation. At last the passage opens into a vaulted chamber where sand gives way to stone tiles, smooth, pale, and impossibly symmetrical. The ceiling arches overhead, like the curve of a celestial dome, rising so high it disappears into darkness. You shine your lantern upward, revealing concentric rings carved with constellations unknown to modern charts. Each star is represented by a tiny niche, once fitted with polished brass or gemstone, now empty but for the faint glimmer of mineral residue. In the hush, you wonder, was this chamber an underground temple or an inverted observatory built beneath earth so that worship could face heaven from below? Stepping onto the stone floor, you feel a faint tremor underfoot, an echo of desert winds above, or perhaps the pulse of something sleeping beneath the bedrock. You trace a spiral pattern etched into the center of the floor, a flight of 70 rings collapsing toward a central point. Scholars have called it the Heaven's Key, a map of orbital paths or the human soul's ascent. You kneel at its edge and press your palm to the stone, feeling a subtle warmth that rises in concentric waves. It is as though the chamber itself remembers the breath of those who once gathered here to summon the sky. Along the chamber's perimeter stand 12 slender pillars, each carved with reliefs of winged figures, angels you think, though their forms differ. Some bear falcon heads, others human masks, all raising arms toward the vault. These guardians seem to hold the chamber aloft, their eyes turned to the spiral floor. You approach the nearest and lean in to study the carvings. Details, feathered wings etched with microscopic precision, robes rippling as if caught in wind, faces serene yet knowing. You imagine priests pressing offerings into the carved hands, oil, wine, frankincense, each gift a prayer for communion with realms beyond. Between each pillar, narrow niches hold remnants of broken pottery and metal fragments, bowls rimmed with gold leaf, iron chalices corroded by time, and bronze statuettes whose features have almost melted away. You lift a small shard, a fragment of a bowl painted with azure stars, and feel the texture under your thumb. It crackles like ancient frost. This chamber, you realize, was no casual sanctuary, but a consecrated vault of ritual, where the boundary between earth and sky dissolved. At the chamber's far end, a low dais carved from a single block of onyx rises from the floor. On it lies a shallow basin filled with crystalline water. You kneel and peer in. The surface is mirror smooth, reflecting the concentric carvings above as though you peer into a miniature cosmos. You dip a finger into the water, sending ripples through the reflected stars. The water tastes of minerals, hard and sweet, with a hint of salt, as if carrying the memory of distant seas. You let the basin drain through your fingers, imagining it releasing visions when it brimmed full. Pressing onward, you find a narrow stairway spiraling upward around the dais. With care, you climb, each step worn smooth by countless pilgrims. The walls here are unadorned, but the air grows cooler and more still. At the stairs' summit, you step into a small alcove crowned by a lattice of stone that admits a single beam of moonlight. You crouch and see that the pagoda above aligns precisely with the spiral floor below, a physical axis linking the chamber to the heavens' dome. It is a mechanism of communion, as if one could speak to stars by ascending this hidden staircase. You descend and pause at a carved inscription at the dais' base. The characters are neither Nabatean nor Aramaic, but a flowing script that curves like smoke. You trace each loop with reverence, a cosmic prayer, an astronomical record, a warning. You cannot read the words, yet their cadence presses on your mind, filling it with half-formed thoughts of destinies written in stone. You inhale deeply, tasting moonlight on your tongue, and realize the chamber demands belief in the unseen. Returning to the center, you gather loose grains of sand, carried in on your boots, and scatter them across the spiral floor. They settle into grooves, highlighting the pattern in gold and bronze dust. You close your eyes and step onto the spiral, following its rings with measured footfalls. 7 rounds, each turn bringing you closer to the center and closer to a threshold beyond thought. With each circuit, the chamber's silence grows denser, until you feel yourself floating between layers of reality. At the final ring, you stand at the spiral's heart. The stone here is polished smooth, unmarred by carving. You lay your palm flat and feel a hum, an echo of your own heartbeat or of the chamber's soul. You bow your head, letting the chamber's breath wash over you, and whisper a question into the stillness. What truths lie beyond this veil? For an instant, the water in the basin ripples upward against gravity, and the murals of angels flicker in your lantern's light as though animated by a silent wind. Then the moment passes, leaving only the soft drip, drip of condensation. Overhead, you rise with a hush, fingers tingling from the stone's pulse. Walking backward, you retrace your path through the pillars, laying silent hands upon each carved guardian. They feel cool and unshakable, as though bound to their task across centuries. Outside the circle of pillars, you brush the lamp clear of dust and lift it high. Its glow pulses against the walls, revealing hidden bas reliefs. One shows a figure pouring water onto the spiral floor, another, a star descending through the dais. Yet another, a line of priests bowing in unison. You step back to the chamber's mouth and extinguish the lamp. Darkness returns, but the spiral's hum echoes in your chest. You step into the corridor, and the world tilts once more, stone giving way to sand, shadows yielding to twilight. The moon's sliver hangs low, guiding you back across dunes toward the desert's edge. The wind carries salt and brimstone now, as we cross into lands where altars of unspoken sacrifice await. You traverse a narrow mountain pass at sunrise where ochre cliffs rise like the walls of a silent fortress. Dust drifts across the path in lazy spirals, carrying the iron tang of earth and memory. Here, they say, lie altars so vast they could not have served goats or grain alone, places where offerings were made not to placate, but to transform. You pause at the lip of a high ledge, the canyon floor far below, and see carved platforms hewn into living rock. Each is strewn with pits and channels, as though the stone itself thirsted for something deeper than water. You descend by a series of worn steps, fingers trailing along the cliff's rough face. The first altar emerges, a broad slab of basalt, scarred by age and ritual. Its surface is etched with concentric circles and radiating lines, like the sun's corona frozen in stone. At its center lies a shallow bowl carved to catch liquids, now filled with rusty sediment. You crouch and scoop a handful, tasting the grainy metal against your tongue. It is not rust, but the residue of countless offerings, oil mixed with blood, wine steeped in sorrow, and perhaps something more arcane, a resin that rings with otherworldly promise. Beside the bowl, grooves channel the sacrificial flow toward a narrow fissure. You peer into the crack and sense darkness stretching downward beyond sight. This channel is not for waste, but for burial of vows, of guilt, of secrets too heavy to carry. You imagine priests tipping their bowls, letting crimson liquid vanish into the earth's throat, each drip echoing a vow whispered in fear. The stone tastes of iron because it drank deeply of it. Rising, you follow a carved path that winds around the cliff face to a second altar. This one is crowned by a semicircular niche carved high above, as though to catch the sky's gaze. Underneath, a row of shallow depressions forms a crescent, each cup-sized chamber stained dark with age. You crouch, running your palm through one, feeling its cool concavity. In its depths lie fragments of pottery, small shards painted with looping glyphs. You recognize symbols for life, death, and threshold. Were these votive shards left by supplicants seeking passage into the afterlife, each sacrifice a key to unlock the unseen door? A breeze stirs, carrying a whisper of ceremony. Drums muted by distance, voices chanting in a language untranslatable, yet urgent. You close your eyes and let the sound guide you eastward, where the cliff opens into a natural amphitheater. There, atop a jutting outcrop, stands the grandest altar of all, a trapezoidal table carved from a single block of pale limestone, its edges softened by centuries of wind. You step forward, the stone cool beneath your bare feet, and circle the altar, as if performing a ritual of your own. On its surface, an intricate mosaic of channels weaves a pattern like a labyrinth. At the labyrinth's heart is a cross-shaped depression, shallow but unmistakable. You kneel and peer inside, noting a faint spiral carved at the bottom. The spiral matches those you have seen in distant temples, symbols of renewal, descent into darkness, and ascension once the rite is complete. You press your fingertip against the spiral's center and feel a subtle vibration, as if the altar itself remembers each sacrificial act. Reaching into your satchel, you lay a single white feather beside the cross, a gesture born of respect rather than custom. You stand back and whisper, "May your echoes remain gentle." The air stills, and for a heartbeat, the feather trembles, then settles. You take this as permission to explore further. Along the cliff's edge, you discover a narrow cavity, a gate's grotto hidden behind a curtain of hanging vines. You push aside the greenery and enter a vaulted niche where altars repeat on a smaller scale. Stone basins carved into the walls hold hardened residue, crystallized honey, resinous frankincense, and streaks of a dark, oily substance you cannot name. You dip a fingertip into the oil and draw a line across your palm. It smells of earth after rain, of decay and rebirth. You let the oil dry on your skin, anointing yourself with the grotto's secret. In the deepest corner of the grotto, you find petroglyphs pecked into the rock, figures raising arms to the sky, animals in stylized procession, and abstract shapes that seem to pulse in the lantern's glow. Among the carvings, one motif repeats: a hand offering a heart-shaped object into a channel cut in the floor. Beneath that channel is a small shaft disappearing into darkness. You press your ear to the opening and hear a faint drip, drip, as if the earth itself were weeping. You retrieve a small jar of water from your pack and pour it into the channel. The liquid vanishes at once, swallowed by the rock's thirst. In that moment, the grotto hums, a low, resonant note that you feel in your bones. You realize the altars are not merely for blood or oil, but for the offering of presence itself. Each sacrifice was a plea for transformation, self into spirit, mortal into myth. Remembering the clifftop altar, you make a slow pilgrimage back up the path, each step echoing a prayer of gratitude. At the trapezoidal table, the dawn's light spills across its surface, illuminating the spiral at its heart. You stand at its center, arms outstretched, and inhale the cool air that rushes through the canyon like breath. The spiral hums beneath your feet, and you sense the converging energies of earth, stone, and sky. You kneel and place a palm over the spiral, closing your eyes. In the darkness behind your lids you see visions, pilgrims bringing vessels brimming with wine, priests chanting in unison, flames dancing in torchlit night, and the altar's channels aglow with liquid fire. You hear their voices in a chorus. We give so that we may become, we suffer so that we may transcend. The vision fades, leaving only the echo of a single word: metanoia, a mind transformed by sacrifice. You rise and trace the labyrinthine channels with your finger, imagining each groove filled with the weight of hope and sorrow, of life given and life reclaimed. The grooves converge once more at the cross-shaped depression, and you realize that the altar is a map of every human heart, a pattern etched in stone so that we might remember the cost of transcendence. As the sun climbs its zenith, you step away from the altar, leaving no footprints but carrying its resonance in your blood. You glance back at the ledge where dozens of carved tables recede into the cliff's folds, each silently waiting for another to come seeking transformation. You offer a final bow and turn toward the valley's edge, guided by the quiet certainty that some sacrifices speak not in blood, but in the stillness that follows. Leave the altars. Let us move east, where language failed and symbols reigned. You emerge from the shadowed gorge into a stony plateau rimmed by wind-sculpted spires of ochre sandstone. Here, on the threshold of ancient ports that once brimmed with bustling trade, lie grotto walls covered in inscriptions that defy every known script. The characters swirl across the rock face like living things, loops, spikes, and interlocking glyphs that refuse to align with cuneiform, Phoenician, or any alphabet in your memory. You reach out and let your fingertips brush the stone. It is cool, deceptively smooth, as though polished by centuries of touch. Early morning light slants across the carvings, casting each symbol into sharp relief. Some appear pictographic, images of boats half sunken, vessels bearing cargo of ivory and incense, fish that gleam like iron. Others are geometric puzzles, concentric squares pierced by diagonal lines, spirals that spiral inward to a point too, tight to trace. No scholar's guidebook mentions this place. No expedition has catalogued its secrets. The inscriptions glow with a defiant energy, as though daring you to decipher them. You circle the grotto, letting your gaze drift from panel to panel. In one recess, a tableau shows robed figures leaning over a steaming brazier, their arms raised as streams of smoke curl around unseen shapes overhead. Beneath them, Lines of fine script arc across the stone, ribbons of language you cannot pronounce. You press your ear to the rock and listen for echoes, but there is only the hush of desert wind and the distant cry of birds. The script remains unmoving, unreadable, yet resonant, as if the stone itself embodies its meaning. Determined to engage, you kneel and draw a small charcoal stick across a smooth slab, making a rubbing of the nearest inscription. The powdery lines transfer onto your paper, snapshots of a code that beckons without revealing. You hold the rubbing close, studying the loops and angles, seeking patterns, repeated clusters, mirrored shapes, glyphs that appear only once. The exercise gives you fleeting familiarity but no certainty. Each attempt to impose order feels like chasing wind. Further into the grotto, you find niches carved into the stone, each holding broken pieces of pottery inscribed with the same cryptic characters. They lie scattered like puzzle fragments. You gather the largest shard, tracing its edge where a sequence of glyphs loops 3 times before abruptly ending. You imagine the vessel once whole, the script wrapping its circumference like a story, told in a single breath. What tale did it narrate? A dedication, a prayer, a warning against trespass? The grotto's roof arches high overhead, shading reliefs that descend toward a subterranean fissure, a narrow cleft leading into darkness. You hesitate, then kneel before it and peer inside. The walls on either side are scrawled with graffiti-like etchings, graffiti older than any city. You make a fresh rubbing of the uppermost lines, careful not to smear the charcoal. When you lift the paper, you see sequences of circles punctuated by dots, each group capped by a sideways triangle. It looks almost musical, as though the script encodes rhythm as much as sense. Lighting a lantern, you step into the fissure. The shaft narrows, squeezing your shoulders, but the walls close in to reveal an inner sanctum, a vaulted chamber no larger than a human heart. Here, the script covers every surface in a flowing rapture that resembles handwriting's most intimate moments. You run your hand along the wall. Faint ridges under your palm, as though the glyphs still breathe. The lantern's glow casts dancing, shadows that make the characters appear to writhe, a living mosaic of meaning just beyond comprehension. At the chamber's far end, you find a stone bench carved at waist height. You sit and spread your rubbings across the surface, aligning fragments in hopes of discovering a coherent passage. Symbols repeat: a coiled serpent, a branching tree, a circle bisected by 2 parallel lines. You sketch lines, connecting, matching. Glyphs watching constellations of meaning emerge and fade. The chamber seems to lean closer, as if eager to surrender its secrets, then recoils as though ashamed of betraying them. Above the bench, carved reliefs depict a scene of instruction, a seated figure, staff in hand, guiding a smaller figure who holds an open scroll. Between them hovers a series of glyphs arranged like notes on a stave. You kneel to examine the relief. The teacher's gaze is serene, yet intense, his finger pointing at a single character, glowing faintly in the rock. You trace that character, a spiral intersected by a lightning bolt, and find it echoed in your rubbings. It reappears every 10th glyph, marking divisions in the text. Perhaps it signifies a pause, a new paragraph, or an invocation to the reader. A faint breeze drifts through a crack high above, carrying the scent of sea salt and brine. You look up and realize this chamber lies near the ancient shoreline, once a crossroads for mariners hauling cargo from distant lands. You imagine traders pausing to carve their messages in hidden alcoves, records of their journeys, logs of storms survived, vows made beneath foreign stars. The script could be a merchant's code, passed between caravans and ships, its meaning safeguarded by layers of mystery. Your lantern flickers and you steady it, the light revealing another layer of complexity, interlinear notes scratched between the main glyphs as though someone once annotated the text, seeking clarity in hopeless language. You kneel and bring your ear close as though listening for a voice behind the stone. Instead, you hear the echo of your own breath, steady and human, reminding you that you stand on the edge of lost worlds. You collect your drawings and stow them carefully, taking only the blackened paper and leaving the rock undisturbed. As you retreat toward the grotto's entrance, the chamber's hush follows you, a quiet born of reverence, not emptiness. You emerge into sunlight, the carved symbols retreating into shadow, guarding their mysteries behind layers of stone. Stepping back onto the plateau, you let the desert wind scrub the dust from your boots. The horizon shimmers with heat, but in your mind the glyphs dance, weaving through your thoughts like half-remembered dreams. You realize the scripts are neither vessel nor message alone, but invitations to wonder, reminders that some knowledge is meant not to be claimed, but to guide the soul in its yearning. You pause at the cliff's edge, gazing down at the waves crashing on distant shores. Perhaps the scripts hold the story of seafarers lost to time, or the voice of an unseen priesthood chanting to hidden gods. You cannot read their words, but you feel their pulse, the insistence of memory refusing to die. You turn inland, ready to follow symbols deeper into the earth, guided by the unspoken promise that understanding may come not through translation, but through the sacred act of listening. The sea recedes, revealing paths once walked by giants. You stand at the edge of a wind-swept plateau, binoculars in hand, scanning the expanse of ochre earth and fractured limestone. From above, satellite images revealed faint geometric outlines, streets and blocky shadows hidden beneath centuries of wind-blown sand. No historian's atlas marks these ruins, no guidebook lists their names. Yet here, when the sun hangs low and the light strikes just so, the ghostly grid of a city emerges, straight avenues bisecting broad plazas, rectangles of foundation stones, and circular mounds that once sheltered domed dwellings. You step forward, letting the crunch of gravel underfoot remind you of your own passage through time. Each footfall shifts a tiny dust devil, uncovering fragments of burnt brick, shards of painted plaster, and flakes of mosaic tile. You crouch to gather a piece of tile, its once vibrant blue now muted by ash and age, and you imagine walls that gleamed like lapis lazuli under a sky they helped chart. Who built this place? What dreams guided its layout when no map yet existed to impose order? Following a shallow depression that hints at an ancient roadway, you walk between broken colonnades, sunk ankle-deep in windblown silt. The columns are too uniform to be natural, each carved with fluted grooves and topped by capitals that once held carved reliefs of winged beasts. Now, only fragments lie scattered like fallen teeth. You trace the grooves with a reverent fingertip, feeling the subtle contour of craftsmanship lost. These stones remember order. They recall a world where human hands shaped the horizon. In the center of what must have been the forum, you find a circular stone dais surrounded by low benches carved into living rock. The benches bear faint inscriptions, names of magistrates, dedications to gods with unfamiliar epithets, and dates inscribed according to a calendar you cannot decipher. You brush away sand from one inscription and reveal a date that predates known empires, a year numbered in cycles of 60, unlike the 72 of Babylon or the 60 of Sumer. Time itself seems to shift here, measured in rhythms forgotten by history. You climb onto the dais and look outward. The city's grid falls away into ruins, roofless rooms half filled with rubble, doorways collapsed into dark pits, courtyards sprouting thorny shrubs. Yet the underlying blueprint remains intact, lines of streets running north-south intersected by cross avenues leading toward a distant hill crowned by a solitary tower. That tower is the only structure still standing in silhouette, its spire a ragged tooth against the horizon. You decide to seek its base, drawn by the promise of vertical memory. Leaving the forum, you follow a broad causeway toward the tower. Along the way you pass a series of pillared gateways, archways hewn from single blocks of limestone. Each lintel bears relief carvings of processions, camels laden with treasure, priests bearing incense burners, and figures in flowing robes raising cupped hands. The carvings are worn, but you discern an image of the crescent moon entwined with a sun disk, symbols of celestial union. Did this city worship both sun and moon as equal deities, balancing light and darkness in its rituals? At the base of the tower, you find a spiral staircase carved into the rock, winding upward into shadows. The steps are steep, each one worn smooth by countless pilgrims. You hesitate at the entrance, listening to the faint echo of wind through interior chambers. Gathering courage, you climb. The spiral lifts you through successive levels, small alcoves cut into the walls, once niches for lamps that must have bathed the staircase in golden glow. Now they stand empty, like hollow eyes watching your ascent. Halfway up, you pause to catch your breath and press your palm to the wall. The stone is warm, as though sunlight has seeped through cracks and settled in its core. You close your eyes and imagine voices, footsteps on stone, distant chanting, the flicker of torchlight marking stages of initiation. This tower may have been a ziggurat in miniature, a place where seekers ascended to attain vision or favor from the watching sky. You resume climbing, each turn drawing you closer to revelation. At the summit, the staircase opens onto a circular platform commanding a breathtaking panorama. The lost city laid out below, its dusty avenues fanning into fields of broken walls, and beyond, the desert stretching to distant dunes. You step onto the platform and feel the breeze carrying particles of sand from miles away. The tower's parapet is carved with star charts that mirror the very heavens now turning overhead, a compass for navigation, a calendar for festivals, a mirror of the mind's journey upward. In the center of the platform stands a low altar carved from basalt. On its surface lies a shallow basin filled with pale dust, grit from the plateau's surface, perhaps mixed with crushed pigments once used to paint murals. You kneel and sift through the dust, revealing fragments of colored stone. Red jasper, black obsidian, green serpentine. These chips must have been offerings, gifts to seal oaths, tokens to bind covenants, or symbols to commit memory to stone. Holding them between thumb and forefinger, you feel the weight of promises made here long ago. A hush falls as the last light of dusk kisses the horizon. You watch as a solitary star appears directly above the altar, aligning with a groove carved into its edge. You press your fingertip into that groove, and for a moment the stone hums, quietly, beneath your touch, like a heart beating in time with the cosmos. You close your eyes and sense the city's pulse, cycles of worship and commerce, births and deaths, the rise and fall of dynasties that never found their way into our chronicles. Descending the tower staircase, You carry a single chip of green serpentine as a keepsake. You place it in your satchel, mindful of its charge, a fragment of a world that never belonged to any map, yet insisted upon its own geometry. Back on the causeway, you pause at a flooded cistern, a rectangular pool half submerged by encroaching sand. You lean over and see your reflection fractured in oily water, ripples distorting your image as though mocking your attempt to anchor certainty. The water tastes faintly saline, an echo of seas the city's traders may have crossed. Walking the grid once more, you let your mind wander the avenues as they were. Markets brimming with exotic wares, scholars debating philosophy beneath colonnades, children racing toward fountains carved in the shape of lions' heads. You see priests conducting secret rites in hidden chambers, artisans inscribing secrets in pottery buried just beyond the city walls, farmers tending date palms in walled orchards watered by canals. All of this pulsed with life, yet vanished, beneath a cloak of dust and memory. You reach the plateau's edge where dunes reclaim the ruins. There, half buried beneath windswept sands, lie stone tablets carved with maps, diagrams of star paths, trade routes, and sacred groves. You brush away sand to reveal one such tablet, its surface etched with the city's plan. Streets and plazas, the tower at its heart, corridors leading to wells and cisterns. You copy the layout in your journal, committing its lines to a map, as if granting the city a second life in your mind. As darkness deepens, you light a small lamp and set it beside the tablet. The glow reveals unexpected details, tiny dots marking wellheads, small squares indicating shelters for travelers, dashed lines pointing toward distant oases, paths few ever trod. The city was a crossroads, a hub of convergence, and a place deliberately hidden from those uninvited. In its silence, it asserts its autonomy, a civilization that chose obscurity over conquest, anonymity over fame. You gather your lamp and your chip of serpentine, then pause once more at the tower's base. You place a hand on the cool stone and whisper, "Your geometry remains, even when the world forgets your name." The wind answers with a soft sigh, lifting grains of sand in tiny whirlwinds that trace the city's grid in miniature. And just beyond those ghost cities, a well, still whispering. You arrive at a secluded valley at dusk where the air is cool with promise and the first stars glimmer faintly above. A narrow path of flagstones leads you between wild thyme and silver-leafed sage until it ends at an unassuming stone well. Its circular wall is low, barely waist-high, and moss clings in damp patches where shadow lingers. No bucket or pulley mars its ancient face. Instead, a simple lintel of weathered oak spans its mouth, carved with runes you cannot read. You lean forward and peer into the darkness below. The well's interior is a void of shimmering black water, mirroring the sky's first pinpricks of light. You kneel beside it, resting your palms on the cold stone, and listen. There is no sound of earth seeping into stone, no drip of distant water, only the soft pulse of your own heartbeat echoing back. You stretch a hand toward the surface, fingertips, hovering just above its glassy face, and feel a pull, as though the well itself beckons you closer. Gently, you lower a simple clay bowl into the well's throat, guiding it by its woven rope. The bowl descends in silence, and you sense the air around you still, as if the world holds its breath. When the rope grows taut, you draw it upward. Inside the bowl lies water, cool and heavy, its surface smooth as obsidian. You lift it, to your lips and taste not the taste of earth or stone, but something faintly sweet, like morning dew on wildflowers, tempered by the tang of distant rain. You set the bowl on the edge of the well and close your eyes. In the hush, images begin to stir behind your lids. A caravan winding beneath a blood-red moon, a child laughing in a garden of night-blooming jasmine, an assembly of sages gazing upward as meteors arc across a velvet sky. You open your eyes and see those visions reflected on the water's surface. Memories not your own, yet vivid in color and motion. You reach out, fingertips brushing ripples that carry the scenes away, only to have new visions take their place. Leaning closer, you notice a pattern in the images. Each one unfolds for exactly 7 heartbeats before dissolving into another. You count on your pulse, 1, 2, 3, and marvel at the synchronicity. The well measures time as gently as it measures memory. You let your breath synchronize until you feel the boundary between your own thoughts and the well's. Revelations blur. Compelled, you run a finger along the well's lip, tracing the faint runes carved into the wood. A warmth spreads beneath your fingertip, and the runes glow softly in the lamplight of the rising moon. The water's surface trembles, and you see a final vision. A woman kneeling beside this very well, her robes shimmering with starlight, her hair crowned with morning glories. She cups her hands and draws water to her lips, closing her eyes as though performing a ritual older than memory. Then she looks up, and her gaze seems to find you across centuries. A breath escapes you, and the vision fades, replaced by inky blackness. You taste the echo of her prayer on your tongue, a soft plea for remembrance, a vow that the well's voice would endure. You sit back on your heels and let the silence speak. A low, resonant hum vibrating through your bones, as if the well were singing in a language more felt than heard. Night deepens, and the valley falls into shadow. You rise and circle the well, noticing at its base a groove worn by countless offerings. You kneel to peer into it and find tiny fragments, petals pressed into the stone, beads of amber resin, flakes of gold leaf. Each fragment carries a fragment of intent, gratitude for healed wounds, petitions for safe passage, laments for lost love. You pick up a faded petal, its edges curled and translucent, and inhale its lingering scent, a breath of rose and tears. You lay it in your palm and press it to your heart. Standing, you place a single white feather beside the bowls of residue, an unspoken gift to the well's memory keeper. You whisper, "For all who came before, and for those who will follow." The feather drifts away on a sudden breeze, swirling into the darkness as though drawn into the well's mysteries. A soft light glimmers at the valley's mouth, a lantern held by another traveler. You turn to see a figure approaching, hooded and silent. They stop at your side and point toward the well, wordless in their awe. You nod, understanding that this place belongs to shared wonder, not solitary discovery. Together you kneel and lower another bowl into the water. This time, as you lift it, the well speaks not in visions but in whisper-soft words reverberating in your mind. Remember me, for I hold what was and what might have been. The voice is gentle, neither male nor female, but the combined breath of countless souls who drank last. You and your companion exchange a quiet glance. You both hear the echo of that plea. You pour the water onto the stones at the well's base, letting each drop carry the well's voice into the earth. The stones drink greedily, and you feel the valley exhale. Moonlight glints off the damp surface, illuminating the runes carved in the lintel. They glow briefly, then fade, leaving only the well's silent promise. Rising, you step away from the neat rim. The traveller at your side places a hand on the wood and murmurs a thank you in a language you do not know. Yet you feel the meaning plainly. Gratitude for memory, for stories too precious to vanish. You offer a bow to the well and walk back along the time-scented path, footprints light on stone. Behind you, the well stands in darkness once more, its voice subsiding into a low murmur, waiting for the next soul brave enough to listen. As you disappear into the night, you carry its whisper in your mind and its water in your heart, knowing that some wells hold not mere liquid, but the dreams of worlds unseen. You stand at the mouth of a yawning crevasse, high in the Zagros range, where wind whistles through cracks as though the mountain itself sighs in welcome. The air is thin and cold, carrying the scent of damp stone and distant pine. Before you, a narrow opening in the rock face descends into darkness, its jagged edges framed by lichen and frost. No carved steps guide your path, only a rough ramp of broken scree that leads into the earth's hidden veins. You tighten your pack straps and step forward, lantern in hand, into the mountain's throat. Immediately, the temperature drops and the lamplight dances on walls streaked with mineral veins, veins of iron red, copper green, and glistening quartz that catch your eye. Each step echoes, a hollow footfall swallowed by unseen chambers. You pause to listen, and in the hush discern the faint drip, drip of water pooling somewhere below. The rhythm is steady, patient, drawing you deeper into the mountain's entrails. After descending several dozen paces, you find the narrow ramp giving way to carved steps, each one uneven and worn by centuries of pilgrimage. You place a hand on the cool stone railing, feeling its smooth surface etched by countless fingers seeking solace or secret. The steps curve inward, spiraling like the shell of a nautilus, guiding you toward a distant glow that shimmers gold. In the lantern's beam, at last, you emerge into a vast cavern whose ceiling recedes into shadow. Stalactites hang like stalwart chandeliers, their tips dripping water that collects into shallow pools. In the center, a ring of 10 pillars stands like guardians, each carved from living rock in the likeness of entwined serpents. Their scales ripple in the lamplight, and their eyes, small crystals inset at each head, catch and refract your light in prismatic flashes. You pause to trace the serpents' bodies with your fingertips, marveling at the artisans who coaxed life into stone. Between the pillars, low passages twist away into darkness. You choose the widest arch and venture forward, mindful of loose stones underfoot. The passage narrows until you squeeze through on hands and knees, lantern held aloft. The walls close in, polished by moisture, and you feel the mountain's pulse. All around you, a living heartbeat of granite and echo. Rounding a sharp bend, you find yourself in a corridor lit by bioluminescent fungi clinging to the walls. Their pale blue glow reveals a tiled floor, inlaid with a labyrinthine pattern of concentric rings and radial spokes, an underground maze carved into the rock itself. You step carefully, so as not to disturb the delicate fungi, following one of the spokes inward. Each twist and turn seems to mirror another, and you sense the builders designed this maze not as prison, but as guide, a ritual path to deeper understanding. Halfway through, the corridor opens onto a low-walled plaza where the air is still and thick. At its center lies a mosaic of polished stones forming a spiral mosaic echoing the labyrinth you walked above. Surrounding it, niches hold clay lamps still faintly scented with dried oil. You kneel to retrieve one, striking a stone to light its wick. The new flame throws the cavern into sharp relief, carved reliefs of figures bearing jars, pouring offerings into the spiral, and animals, lions, goats, and birds, marching in silent procession. You follow a narrow stairway tucked behind the plaza's eastern wall. The steps lead downward again, each tread carved to exact the same height, betraying careful craftsmanship. The air grows warmer, scented now with a faint tang of sulfur. You round the stairwell's bend and arrive at a chamber glowing with molten veins, streams of mineral-rich water flowing like liquid metal over the floor, pooling into a shallow basin. Wisps of steam rise in eddies, and the sound here is a soft hiss, like breath escaping a wound. At the basin's edge, you find an altar of black basalt, its surface polished to mirror sheen. You lean closer and see carved symbols inlaid with gold, leaf, spirals, triangles, and stylized eyes. A shallow trough channels the molten flow around the altar's perimeter, as though consecrating it in liquid fire. You dip a corner of cloth into the basin, careful not to scald, and touch the molten water. It flows smoothly, warm but not unbearably hot, carrying the mineral scent of Earth's core. You squeeze the cloth, catching droplets in a cup. Climbing. From the basin, you follow another passage marked by petroglyphs scorched into the stone. Scenes of initiation rituals, figures entering the labyrinth, emerging at dawn with torches in hand. You trace each petroglyph with reverence, feeling the weight of ancestral vows traveling through your fingers. The corridor widens into a crypt-like hall where stone sarcophagi line the walls. Each lid bears a bas-relief portrait of a robed figure, priests or seekers, hands crossed over their chests, eyes closed in eternal sleep. Between the sarcophagi stretches a raised dais, and upon it a column of obsidian polished until it reflects your lantern like a dark mirror. You approach and see your reflection fractured by hairline cracks running through the stone. Beneath your reflection, an inscription reads in archaic syllabary, "Here lies the seeker who found truth and became stone." You whisper the words, feeling their truth resonate in your chest, knowledge and sacrifice intertwined. Suddenly a soft rumble shakes the chamber, dust drifts from the vaulted ceiling, and water ripples in the molten basin above. You realize the mountain shifts around. You, an ancient heartbeat reminding you of its power. You steady your lantern and step back, breath catching as you consider how easily stone can become entombment. The seekers here did not fear death. They embraced fusion with the mountain, their memories etched into rock for eternity. You backtrack through the crypt, leaving the obsidian column to its vigil. The labyrinth's mouth awaits, its paths now familiar beneath your feet. Outside the fungus-lit corridor, you pause once more in the serpent hall and place a hand on one pillar's crystalline eye. You murmur thanks to the guardians, stone, serpents who led you through Earth's secrets. The crystal glimmers, and for a moment, you think it pulses with life. Retracing the stairway, you climb toward daylight, each step lighter as the cavern's weight lifts from your shoulders. At the crevasse's mouth, the world expands once more. Snow-dusted peaks glitter in morning light, and wind carries the scent of pine and thawing ice. You step onto open rock, carrying the basin's molten water in your cup and the labyrinth's mosaic pattern etched into your memory. You pause at the ridge's edge, gazing at the valley below where rivers wind like silver ribbons. The mountain's raw power feels settled now, as if sharing its hidden heart with those patient enough to descend. You clasp the cloth saturated with molten water against your chest and whisper a vow. May the truths I carry remain gentle, and may these stones keep their silence. Out from the darkness into a garden long erased. You emerge from the mountain's cool embrace into a hidden valley shrouded in mist, where the air is warm and fragrant with the scent of blossoms. Before you lies a walled garden hewn from living rock, its stone walls draped in creeping ivy and tendrils of jasmine. Here time seems to fold in on itself. Spring's first buds mingle with autumn's russet leaves, and roses bloom beside frost-tipped ferns. You cross a flagstone path slick with dew, and pause to drink in the impossible harmony of seasons intertwined. At the garden's heart stands a sundial carved from pale marble, its gnomon etched with celestial glyphs. Yet no shadow moves across its face. The dial remains fixed, a silent sentinel unmoved by hour or sun. You trace the glyphs with a fingertip, spirals of sunbursts, crescents cradling stars, crossed by lines marking solstices and equinoxes. None correspond to any calendar you know. This place rejects chronology, honoring only the eternal cycle of growth, bloom, wither, and return. You step onto a circular mosaic at the sundial's base, composed of stones in every hue. Greens of new leaves, reds of ripe fruit, blues of night-blooming flowers. The pattern spirals outward in 12 segments, each depicting a different plant at its peak. Cherry blossoms bursting in pale pink, sunflowers tall with golden faces, irises dipping in violet pools, pomegranates heavy with crimson seeds. You feel the mosaic pulse beneath your feet, each step commanding a bloom or a fall without regard to any earthly timetable. A gentle breeze stirs, carrying the faint chime of wind harp strings suspended among the vines. You follow the sound to an arbor draped in wisteria. Clusters of lavender blossoms hang like chandeliers above a stone bench. As you settle onto the bench, petals drift down around you, translucent and glowing faintly in the dappled light. You catch one and hold it between your fingers, its texture cool and silky, as if touched by moonlight rather than sun. From the arbor, a narrow terrace leads you along a koi pond, where fish of fiery orange, pearl white and burnished bronze glide through water as clear as glass. Lilies float on the surface, their petals open wide, though below, frost crystals cling to their stems. You kneel at the pond's edge and extend your hand until a curious fish nudges your palm. You feel the vibration of its scales, a gentle reminder that life here flows both above and below the seasons divide. Continuing along a moss-covered walkway, you arrive at a grove of citrus trees. On one branch swings a ripe lemon, bright as midday sun, while beside it a bough of pomegranate hangs heavy with pods. You pluck a lemon and inhale its sharp, tangy scent, an aroma of sun and citrus groves carried by distant winds. Then you reach for a pomegranate, its leathery skin warm and yielding. You break it open, releasing a cascade of ruby seeds that glimmer like garnets. You taste one, sweet, tart, a flavor that lingers on your tongue like a memory of both summer and autumn. Beyond, the grove, a low hedge of boxwood, encloses a bed of orchids, flowers that bloom only in the height of heat. Yet here, despite the valley's cool shade, pale blossoms unfurl like lanterns, revealing intricate patterns of violet and ivory. You lean in to study an orchid's throat, where dew beads like liquid crystal. You press a single drop to your lips and taste honeyed nectar threaded with spring rain. Further on, the path climbs a gentle rise to a rocky outcrop where grapevines twist through fissures. Clusters of grapes hang in various stages, emerald green blooms ready to burst, deep, purple bunches heavy with juice and shriveled raisin gems clinging like ancient secret. You pick a grape from each cluster in turn, tasting the promise of growth, the fullness of harvest, and the wisdom of preservation. At the outcrop summit, you find a small pavilion of white marble, its columns carved as intertwining vines. Inside, a pool of still water reflects the garden in perfect symmetry. Flowers and fruit floating in crystalline suspension. You sit at the pavilion's edge, feet dipping into the water's cool embrace, and watch fish, each scale a different hue, spiral beneath the surface. Above the pavilion, carved into the ceiling's underside, is a frieze depicting gardeners tending plants through imagined seasons, sowing seeds beneath falling snow, pruning limbs in midsummer heat, gathering blossoms in autumn wind. The figures move in a silent dance, as though enacting rituals to sustain the garden's impossible bloom. You trace their forms, marveling at the devotion required to nurture eternity. A soft melody drifts through the pavilion, a song of wind and water, of blossoms opening and leaves falling. You rise and close your eyes, letting the harmony wash over you. In that moment, you feel the garden's secret. It is neither bound to spring nor autumn, but to the soul's longing for renewal. Each bloom is an echo of hope, each wither a promise of return. You step from the pavilion and follow a flight of stone steps leading down to a sunken glade where pale mushrooms glow in iridescent rings. Their caps radiate mossy green and ghostly blue, illuminating the glade. Like lanterns in dusk, you kneel to examine them, caps smooth as pearls, gills etched like filigree. You collect one in your palm, feeling its delicate weight, then release it to hover above your hand, suspended by unseen air currents, before it drifts back to the circle. A hush falls and the garden seems to exhale. Petals rain from unseen blooms, leaves flutter in a dance without wind, and fruit ripens then fades in an instant. You catch a single petal, shaped like a star, and press it to your heart. You understand that this garden is not a place but a promise, that life's beauty transcends time's passage, that growth and decay are but companions in an unending waltz. As moonlight rises, the garden dims in gentle rhythm. Flowers close their petals. Fruits fold inward. You stand upon the sundial once more, where no shadow has ever moved, and bow your head in gratitude. The stones beneath your feet pulse one final time, a heartbeat that resonates in your chest. Turning, you walk back along the path, past the koi pond's still water, through the arbor's fading wisteria, and across the mosaic's 12 blooms. Each step leaves no trace but carries the garden's essence within you. You disappear beyond the ivy-draped walls, guided by the memory of blossoms in eternal bloom. A wind carries petals into the night, and with them the promise that every season lives within us. You cross the final ridge of ochre dunes at dusk, where the horizon glows with an otherworldly light. In the distance, tiny flames dance atop a barren hill, flickering like will-o'-the-wisps in the dark. As you approach, the ground crackles underfoot, and warm gusts smell of brimstone and desert sand. Here, in this forgotten corner of the world, Earth's hidden breath bursts into flame, creating portals of fire that burn night after night without wood or oil. Stepping closer, you feel heat ripple across the blackened soil. Pockets of methane trapped deep beneath the surface ignite when exposed to air, producing flickering plumes of blue and orange flame. Yet these are no mere gas seeps. The fires blaze within shallow rock craters arranged in deliberate clusters. You kneel beside one and feel its warmth on your cheek, tasting the dry tang of mineral-rich smoke. Sparks drift upward, swirling like fireflies caught in a tempest. Around each crater, concentric rings of scorched stone form patterns too precise to be natural. You crouch and trace the nearest ring with your finger. Charred basalt, pocked with tiny pits that once held offerings. Small grooves channel the molten residue into narrow channels, guiding the fire's flow like ritual veins. The stone radiates heat, as if trying to preserve the flame's memory. You close your eyes and imagine pilgrims kneeling here, hands outstretched, seeking insight from these living embers. Moving from one portal to the next, you discover altars, carved from living rock. Shallow basins inscribed with glyphs glowing faintly in lamplight. The symbols depict serpents coiling around flame, birds alighting on smoke, and robed figures lifting lanterns toward the sky. You cup your palms over one basin and feel the heat ripple through your fingers. In the basin's center lies a chipped pottery shard, painted with the image of a phoenix rising, its wings aflame. The shard's surface still shimmers with ochre, pigment as though the fire itself infused the clay. You place the shard back and study the glyphs carved around the basin's rim. Each figure appears in motion, dancing between life and death, consumed and renewed. You recognize a cycle. Sacrifice by fire leads to transformation by flame. Perhaps these portals were gateways not only of smoke and heat, but of spirit. Across the dunes, chants must have once echoed beneath a moonlit canopy, invoking gods of fire to reveal hidden truths. A sudden gust stirs the embers, sending sparks arcing into the sky like shooting stars. You step back, shielding your eyes, and marvel as the desert wind becomes a conductor, coaxing the flames to dance in elaborate choreography. The fires pulse in unison, brightening, then dimming as though breathing. You feel the desert's heartbeat. Synchronize with your own. Inhale, exhale, ignite, ebb. Night falls fully, and the fires cast long shadows that smolder across the dunes. You settle onto a stone slab carved into the hillside, a vantage point between two blazing portals, and wrap your cloak against the heat. From here, you watch the interplay of light and dark, fire and earth, human and divine. No animal stirs in the surrounding scrub. The world beyond these flames seems paused, held in rapture. You close your eyes and let the warmth seep into your bones. In the darkness behind your lids, visions dance, ancient priests in saffron robes tracing paths of flame, pilgrims pressing, offerings of frankincense into glowing craters. Firebirds soaring above dunes, their feathers trailing embers that fall like gentle snow. You inhale the images as if they were smoke, letting them drift through your mind. A soft hum emerges from the fire, a resonance between gas, flame, and stone. You lean forward to listen, fingertips brushing the scorched edge of the basin. The hum deepens into a note that vibrates in your chest, a tonal key unlocking something buried in your memory. You realize the fire speaks in frequencies beyond speech, a language of heat, light, and vibration that transcends words. Compelled, you rise and circle the plateau, placing a hand on each crater's rim. In each touch, you feel a pulse, unique yet harmonious, like a choir of elemental voices. The stones glow under your palm, acknowledging your presence. You whisper a prayer of thanks to the desert's hidden hearths, honoring the flame as both destroyer and creator. Between the portals lies a low alcove carved into rock, where charred remnants of ceremonial garb cling to iron hooks. You examine a scorched fragment of textile, woven threads still holding traces of crimson dye. It must have once draped a shaman, insulating them against the glare of the flames. Nearby, a set of bronze bowls sits in a shallow trench, their interiors coated with ash and oil stains. You scoop a handful of ash and let it fall back between your fingers. A memory of sacrifice dissolving in the desert's breath. Beyond the alcove, the ground slopes toward a dry creek bed. You follow its winding path and find a cluster of hooded stones, miniature monoliths arranged like silent witnesses. Each bears a single glyph, a spiral, a sunburst, a flame wreathed in smoke. In their center stands a solitary ring of flame burning atop a column of basalt. You approach cautiously, the heat prickling your skin, and see at its base a faint inscription. Here the veil thins and the fire reveals. You trace the letters with reverence. At that moment, the flames coalesce into a single pillar of fire, towering above the basalt column. The light intensifies, and you feel the stones around you hum in response. You step closer, breath held, and watch as the fire curls upward, morphing into shapes, winged figures, serpentine coils, dancing silhouettes before dissipating into embers. Each shape flickers for a heartbeat, then dissolves. You realize you are witnessing the desert's memory of ritual, the fire itself becoming the storyteller. As the pillar subsides, you feel the desert exhale, and the plateau falls into stillness. You sit once more on the stone slab, breath slow and steady, letting embers drift across your vision. The vastness of the night sky above mirrors the field of flames below, each star a distant ember in the cosmic forge. You sense a kinship between the portals of fire and the heaven's own furnace. Rising with the desert's lullaby in your ears, you gather a small stone warmed by the closest fire, a talisman of heat and memory. You press it to your chest, feeling its residual warmth pulse in time with your heart. Then, stepping back from the craters, you let the lantern's light fade, relying on moonlight to guide you from this cathedral of flame. The dunes whisper at your feet as you walk away, carrying the stone's heat within you. Behind, the portals burn on, guardians of the desert's hidden hearths. You turn once, offering a silent farewell to the flames, and smile at the thought that some fires never consume but illuminate. The fire gives way to frost as we climb higher. You leave the smouldering portals of flame behind and climb steadily into the craggy highlands of Lebanon, where the air thins and each breath tastes of pine resin and distant winter. The slopes are carved by ancient glaciers, and beneath your boots, dark shale gives way to a dusting of white snow. Not unusual at this elevation, except that before dawn the air was clear, and the valley you traversed showed no hint of frost or flake. Here, at midday, snow drifts in swirling wisps, covering fir branches and stone alike with impossible layers of freshness. You pause at a rocky outcrop to watch the snow fall, large feathery flakes that drift as if carried by unseen wings rather than wind. They tumble in silence, each unique in form, dissolving quietly upon contact with the moss and lichen. You hold out a gloved hand and catch a single flake, its crystal lattice perfect, an ephemeral star melting on your palm. You marvel at its pattern. 6 spindly arms branching into fractal filigree, an instant's artwork destined to vanish. Pressing onward, you follow a narrow trail carved into the mountainside. The path winds between pines whose needles bend under soft snow, their dark trunks a stark contrast in the whitened world. Icicles drape from rocky ledges, glinting like frozen tears. You inhale the crisp air, feeling it sharpen your senses. Each snap of twig, each soft hiss of falling snow resonates in the stillness. You realize the mountain has become a cathedral of winter, consecrated by flurries that drift where no storm should reach. At the trail's crest, you discover a ruined temple built of pale limestone. Its columns stand shattered and pockmarked, yet the capitals carved with acanthus leaves remain intact. Snow blankets the temple's floor, melting around fallen blocks to reveal mosaic fragments, tesserae in lapis, malachite, and gold set in swirling arabesques. You kneel and brush aside fresh flakes, uncovering scenes of ancient worship, figures lifting chalices to the sky, vines curling around sacrificial fires, birds flying toward unseen heights. Here, snow and mosaic merge, as if the mountain itself preserves these fragments in white embrace. Stepping into the temple's open nave, you feel a hush deeper than silence, the kind that follows revelation. A marble altar lies at the far end, its surface etched with stars and crescent moons. A thin coating of snow outlines each engraving, making them glow in the diffuse light. You approach and run a finger along the carvings. The cold marble yields to warmth from your touch, and the snow melts into rivulets that trace the star paths. You lift a rivulet to your lips and taste minerals, chalky and pure, carrying the essence of both stone and sky. Beyond the temple, a grove of cedar trees rises like ancient pillars. Their boughs bend, shaking off snow in gentle showers. You wander between them, stepping carefully to avoid hidden roots under the snowpack. Each cedar feels alive with memory, sap that once sealed temple roofs, inks mixed from its resin for scrolls, planks hewn for ships that crossed stormy seas. Now the trees stand as silent witnesses to snow in the desert air, an anomaly that deepens the mountain's mystery. Deeper into the grove, you find a natural amphitheater carved by eons of erosion. Its stone benches are ringed with snow, and at its center is a pool of dark, unfrozen water. The pool's surface is so still it mirrors the sky, reflecting a swirl of clouds and icy blue patches of heaven. You kneel at the edge, cupping water in your gloved palms. It is cold but alive, as though distilled from melting glaciers. You let it trickle through your fingers, each drop disappearing into the ground as if the earth thirsts for winter's offering. A sudden wind rises, sending snow dancing across the amphitheater. The flakes drift in eddies, guided by contours of stone and air currents you cannot see. You stand and raise your arms, letting the snow settle on your coat and hair. In this moment, you feel part of the mountain's breath, a participant in an event seldom witnessed, snowfall where none should fall. You close your eyes and listen to the snow's soft arrival, each flake's landing a quiet note in a symphony of cold. Continuing onward, you follow the amphitheater's rim to a narrow cleft, leading to a hidden valley. The cleft's walls are polished smooth, as if water once carved this passage before the snow claimed it. You step through and find yourself in a sheltered bowl of rock where wind cannot penetrate. There, Snow accumulates in crystalline drifts that rise waist-high. Within the bowl stands a single stone monolith, an obelisk hewn from granite and inscribed with weathered glyph. Its surface is dusted with snow, filling crevices and highlighting each carved line. You lean close and read the glyphs, symbol of the sun and moon entwined, a spiral of seasons, and a verse in a tongue unspoken for millennia. You trace the script with an index finger, feeling the stone's cold warmth under the snow. The glyphs speak of a covenant that in extremes of heat and cold, the mountain stands as guardian of balance. The obelisk marks a threshold where summer's fires meet winter's stillness, and where those who cross learn that extremes converge. Raising your gaze, you see the sky darken with heavy clouds gathering above the peaks. The wind returns through the cleft, carrying a gust that swirls snow into patterns across the obelisk's base. You take a step back, letting the blast brush past, and as it recedes, the sky opens to reveal a single, pale sun. Its light strikes the obelisk's face and refracts through melting snow, casting rainbow fragments into the bowl. You watch in wonder as the prism plays across the granite, a fleeting promise that life persists even in cold's grip. Descending from the bowl, you carry a handful of snow in a leather pouch, a token of the mountain's paradox. Each drifting flake you gathered holds a story of moisture drawn from distant seas, carried aloft on thermals to fall where none expected. You think of the desert below where life clings to mirages, and the snow above where life sleeps in crystalline pores. Both are reflections of the Earth's endless cycles, bound by roots only nature can chart. At the grove's edge, you find a narrow stairway cut into living rock, leading to a plateau crowned by a ruined watchtower. Climbing, breath visible, in the cold air you emerge onto the ramparts. Snow drifts in shallow banks around collapsed battlements. You lean on the stone wall and gaze across the highlands. Ridges and valleys painted pale, the cedar tops shimmering white, and the distant temple glowing faintly through the storm's edge. Here, at the watchtower's summit, you offer your pouch of snow to the mountain. You open it and let the flakes drift out, catching on the wind and returning to the earth. Each flake's descent seems deliberate, as though the mountain claims back its gift. You stand in silence, feeling the summit's breath on your face and tasting both chill and warmth in your lungs. Turning away, you follow the ridgeline down to lower slopes where snow thins into dusting and the air warms with each step. You pause on a sunlit terrace, brushing your sleeve to remove clinging flakes. The valley below stretches into arid plains, dunes shifting with the breeze, and pockets of green where life thrives between stones. As you descend into that world of heat and sand, you carry the mountain's paradox within you, snow where it shouldn't fall, stone warmed by the sun and cold alike. You feel the echo of winter's hush in your bones and the memory of blossoms in your heart. The mountain taught you that extremes converge and that in every season's heart lies a strand of its opposite, snow in desert air, flame in frozen stone, memory in the silence between. The frost fades as you return to sunlit sands, but its hush remains in your breath. You emerge from the shifting sands onto a rocky terrace suspended above a hidden wadi, its walls streaked with mineral veins and wildflowers clinging to cracks. Here, in an amphitheater carved by water and wind, blooms a garden unlike any you've known, lush terraces cascading in verdant tiers, defying the desert's thirst. Vines tumble over stone balustrades, their blossoms glowing in shades of emerald, lavender, and rose. You step forward, feeling soft moss cushion your soles as you cross a flagstone path lined with carved basins brimming with clear, cool water. Each basin is fed by a network of hidden channels, water trickling from unseen springs deep within the cliff. You lift your hand and let droplets fall through your fingers, tasting their sweetness. Earth and rock distilled into clarity. The sound of water is constant but gentle, a hush of miniature waterfalls, a susurrus of ripples playing over smooth stones. You follow the sound upward, where terraces rise in concentric rings, each one planted with different species, pomegranate and citrus trees heavy with fruit, jasmine and orange blossoms arcing in fragrant boughs, creeping succulents whose plump leaves glisten with morning dew. In the center of the lowest terrace stands a marble fountain carved in the shape of a lion's head. Water pours from its open mouth in a crystalline arc, landing in a pool tiled with mother-of-pearl and obsidian. You kneel at the pool's edge and peer in. Fish of gold and onyx glide beneath the surface, their scales catching the light like moving stars. A pair of koi skims your reflection, then disappears into a grotto below, where bioluminescent fungi cast ghostly blue halos against damp stone. You rise and ascend a narrow staircase hewn into living rock. Each step is worn smooth by centuries of footsteps, pilgrims, gardeners, poets, drawn here by tales whispered in market squares and caravanserai. The walls on either side are inlaid with mosaic friezes, figures carrying water jars, musicians playing reed flutes, children chasing doves across grassy cloisters. One panel shows a gardener kneeling beside a seedling, his hands cupped around its fragile stem as if cradling a newborn life. You pause to trace his weathered fingertips and feel the pulse of devotion that nurtured this place into being. At the top terrace, the air thickens with perfume. Roses of every hue climb trellises woven with silvered vines, their petals heavy with nectar. You pass beneath an arch of climbing wisteria, its lavender blossoms forming a scented tunnel. Sunlight filters through leaves in mottled patterns on the ground, and you catch a glimpse of wind-blown petals drifting through the air like confetti. Beneath a bower of pomegranate blossoms you find a bench of polished onyx, its surface cool and veined with crimson lines like the garden's own circulatory system. Seated there, you close your eyes and breathe deeply. You feel the layers of seasons coexisting, the tang of citrus, the sweetness of rose, the green bite of basil, the smoky aroma of sage. Each scent threads into the next, weaving a tapestry that anchors you in this impossible oasis. You sense day and night entwined here, moonlight filtering through translucent petals, dawn dew glinting on stone, twilight humming with the soft beat of cicadas. From your vantage, you spot a slender aqueduct arching across the wadi's mouth, carrying water from a source unseen. Beneath the aqueduct's curve lies a grove of flowering almonds, their branches sagging under pale pink blossoms. You rise and make your way down a winding ramp to reach them. As you walk, you notice carved niches in the rock, shrines to unknown deities, each housing a broken jar or a fragment of oil lamp. Offerings placed here likely honored gods of fertility, protection, and growth. At the grove's center stands an ancient pavilion of driftwood and vine, its rafters entwined with honeysuckle and clematis. You step beneath its canopy and find a low table hewn from oak, its surface inlaid with mother-of-pearl script, spelling words you cannot read. You lean over and feel the carved letters under your fingertips, smooth yet imperative, as though they speak a timeless invitation to sit, to rest, to remember. You obey, settling on embroidered cushions softened by centuries of use. From the pavilion, you gaze across the terraces. Sunlight catches the water's arc, sending rainbows dancing across leaves. Birds, nightingales and orioles, flit among branches, their song a living refrain that weds earth and air. In this suspended world, time loses its gravity. Hours stretch into endless moments, and moments expand into hours. You realize this garden defies the desert's narrative of scarcity. Here, abundance is not borrowed but intrinsic. A gentle breeze stirs the honeysuckle and a petal drifts down to rest on your shoulder. You brush it away only to find another nestled in your hair. You smile at the garden's playful mercy, small gifts for those who wander softly enough to seek beauty in desolation. You rise and wander back toward the lion's fountain, pausing at a carved basin rimmed with basalt. In its water lies a reflection of branches overhead, but tinted with colors unseen in daylight, vibrant teal and amethyst suggesting realms beyond your senses. Kneeling, you let your fingertips skim the surface. The moment you touch the water, the garden's whispers swirl in your mind. Here, life transcends the impossible. Here, memory and renewal dance as one. You draw 3 droplets and press them to your lips, tears of the garden distilled into purity. You feel their warmth spread inward, mingling with your own breath. A low chime echoes from the pavilion, perhaps wind harp strings vibrating in sudden silence. You turn to see a lone figure emerge, a gardener cloaked in linen dyed the color of desert sand, hands cradling a basket of seed pods. They pause, bowing their head in recognition rather than greeting. You offer a silent nod in return, understanding that here words would fall flat against living artistry. The gardener sets the basket at the pavilion entrance and gestures for you to choose a pod. You take one, a pomegranate pod, its shell dimpled with promise. You hold it gently, feeling its weight as if balancing the world's bounty in your palm. The gardener smiles, then retreats into the shaded grove, leaving you alone with the garden's breath. You walk once more through the terraces, each step a bookend to your journey, through citrus trees beneath wisteria arches, past marble lion fountains, and along moss-soft paths. The sun dips toward the ridge and shadows lengthen into violet ribbons across stone. You pause at the outer wall, where creeping ivy drapes a carved relief of a king and queen seated in quiet reverie. The inscription below reads in a tongue lost to time, "Their love made bloom the impossible." You touch the carving, feeling the faint pulse of devotion embedded in every curve. Turning away, you step through an arched gateway carved from living rock. The gate closes behind you in memory alone. No stone shifts, no latch falls. The garden recedes into the wadi's shadow, its terraces swallowed by rock and bloom. Yet as you descend to the valley floor, you carry the hanging garden's essence. Seed pods heavy in your pack, petals pressed to your heart, and the knowledge that beauty can flourish where none should exist. A final petal drifts down the cliff, reminding you that even the hidden can bloom in full sight. You tread softly through the ancient streets of a once great city, now half buried by shifting sands. Ruined colonnades lean like bowed heads, and collapsed archways form silent portals to worlds long vanished. At the heart of these ruins lies a raised platform of black granite, its surface polished to mirror sheen despite centuries of neglect. Centered on that platform is a single, iron-bound door set into the ground, the vault that never opens. The door's face is pitted with age, yet the iron bands gleam as if newly forged. Intricate motifs of interlocking rings and spirals are hammered into the metal, each flourish echoing the ouroboros of time itself. No keyhole or latch is visible, no seam betrays its hinges. Scholars have called it the iron enigma. Local legends claim it guards either unimaginable treasure or unspeakable horror. You kneel and press your palms against its cold surface, feeling a faint vibration, like a heartbeat buried deep beneath the earth. Around the vault, 4 slender pillars rise. From the platform's corners, each carved from the same polished granite. Their capitals bear reliefs of 4 guardians, a lion with eyes of onyx, a bull with horns of bronze, an eagle with wings unfolded in flight, and a serpent coiled in patient repose. You circle the vault, pausing at each pillar to touch the carving. With each contact, the iron door hums more intensely, as if awakening. You sense not malevolence, but expectation. Above you, the sky darkens to twilight, and desert wind spirals across broken mosaic floors. You trace the faded tesserae, once brilliant lapis and gold, depicting processions of masked figures carrying flame-lit braziers. They converge upon this very platform, their footsteps an ancient pilgrimage. You imagine priests chanting in unison, each voice raised in solemn prayer for release from duty, from fear, or from the cycle of rebirth itself. Kneeling, once more at the vault's edge, you examine the circling spiral engraved into the granite around the door's rim. The spiral begins at the north pillar and winds twice around before ending at the south. Within its grooves are tiny notches, 72 in total, spaced unevenly as though marking segments of time rather than distance. You press a finger into the first notch and feel a subtle click echo beneath the metal. The door trembles but does not open. You move to the next notch, then the next, pausing at each to listen. With each click, the humming grows deeper, resonating in your chest like a drum. After the 42nd notch, the humming reaches a crescendo that rattles nearby stones. The air thrums, charged with the weight of centuries, yet the iron door remains steadfastly closed. You step back and let your breath steady. You realize this is no simple lock, but a ritual lock designed to be engaged by a precise pattern, a rite lost to memory. The vault demands not force but homage, not keys but sacrifice of intent. Rising, you circle the platform, observing the guardians once more. Their reliefs seem to shift in the fading light. The lion's onyx eyes glinting, the bull's bronze horns glimmering, the eagle's feather-carved wings almost fluttering, the serpent's scales rippling in silent tide. You sense that each guardian represents an element, earth, metal, air, and water. Yet one remains missing: fire. Somewhere in this city a 5th pillar must have stood, consumed by time or hidden where only the worthy could find it. Guided by intuition, you follow a narrow alley toward a collapsed temple. Amid the rubble you find a solitary brazier of blackened iron, still half buried in sand. Its bowl is glazed with ash and rust, and within lies a single obsidian shard shaped like a flame. You lift it and feel its edge hum with heat you cannot see. Holding the shard high, you return to the vault's platform, its humming welcoming you home. Placing the shard atop the spiral's center, you kneel and press it into the granite so that it fits the final notch seamlessly. The instant the shard settles, the ground quakes beneath your knees. The pillar's guardians shudder in their reliefs, and the iron door's seams glow with molten veins that course like living blood. You stand as the vault exhales a breath of hot air, smelling of embers and spice. With a grinding roar, the iron bands shift apart, revealing a gap just wide enough to glimpse the chamber within. Darkness lies beyond, yet you perceive movement. Walls lined with crystalline formations, faintly luminous in shifting colors. You realize the vault was not designed to keep something out, but to contain something within, an otherworldly wonder or an ancient sorrow. Before you step forward, you pause to honor the guardians. You lay the obsidian shard at the lion pillar's base, a gesture of respect. You then turn to the bull, the eagle, and the serpent, leaving a small offering of desert flowers whose petals glow faintly in moonlight. Each gift you place acknowledges the elemental forces they embody. Finally, you face the open door. A current of warmth brushes your cheeks, beckoning you into the chamber. You take a deep breath and step across the threshold. The iron door slides, shut behind you with a whisper, sealing you inside. Within, the air shimmers, lit by crystalline walls that pulse with radiant energy. The floor is polished obsidian, reflecting your silhouette amid swirling prisms of light. At the room's center stands a pedestal of living flame, a fire that burns without smoke or heat, its tendrils weaving constellations in glowing script. You approach and read the patterns, star maps of vanished worlds, constellations lost to history, synopses of cosmic events beyond mortal reckoning. You realize the vault guards not treasure of gold, but truths too vast for open eyes. The flame is memory itself, dancing in suspended form, sharing glimpses of creation and oblivion. You reach out, brushing a fingertip through the fire. It parts around your hand, leaving no burn, and imprints a single symbol upon your palm, a spiral crowned with a star. In that moment, the door's iron bands retract once more, and you step back into the cool night. The brazier's ember still rests where you left it, glowing faintly. You stand upon the platform, gazing at the closed vault once again. Its iron face is unmarked as though nothing has changed. Yet within your palm, the spiral star pulses with warmth and memory. You bow before the vault and whisper a vow. I will carry your truths gently, sharing only what the world is ready to hear. A soft wind stirs, scattering desert flowers. Around the platform in response, a silent benediction. Turning, you leave the raised terrace, each footstep echoing through the silent city. The pillar's guardians watch you go, their stone eyes unblinking. Behind them, the vault stands waiting, its secret flame confined once more, its chamber sealed until another seeker arrives who honors its rites. And in the hush, between heartbeat and breath, the vault's promise lingers, some doors open only to the soul prepared to bear their light. You step into a silent grove at dawn, where mist curls around the bases of ancient stone pillars half swallowed by ivy. No inscription marks their surfaces, yet you recognize them as civic monuments older than any script you know. Each pillar stands as a shard of collective memory, shadows of deeds and ideas that predate language. You run your fingers along the weathered edges, feeling the resonance of thoughts never carved into stone, but carried in the breath of wind and the hush of leaves. Beneath these columns lies a floor of packed earth, worn smooth by generations of pilgrims who came not to read, but to remember. You kneel and press your palm into the soil, letting the ground's cool firmness anchor you. In that touch, you sense echoes. Footsteps marching in solemn processions, murmurs of counsel exchanged under star-lit skies, the low hum of collective, attention focused on wonders too delicate for speech. Memories flow from the earth into your veins, weaving a tapestry of sight and sound beyond words. Rising, you walk toward the heart of the grove, where a circle of stones encloses a shallow basin filled with rainwater. Petals and pine needles drift upon its surface, creating patterns of color that shift with each breeze. You lean over and peer into the water's depths, and for a moment, you glimpse visions. Turquoise birds soaring above lost cities, red-cloaked. Travelers tracing divine maps across desert sands, hands raised not in prayer, but in silent recognition of beauty. The basin does not reflect your face, but a world before names. Stepping back, you find a fallen log carved with faint grooves, no letters, only abstract symbols, half-circles, intersecting lines, spirals running into spirals. You sit upon the log and trace one spiral with your fingertip, letting its motion guide your thoughts. In the absence of language, the symbols become music, a melody of curves and chords that speaks in shapes rather than sounds. You close your eyes and hear the grove's symphony, rustling leaves, dripping dew, distant bird calls, each note a memory too subtle for utterance. Ahead, a narrow path leads you between mossy boulders to a small amphitheater carved naturally into rock. Here, the earth itself forms seats and stage. You climb onto the stage and stand with arms open. In the hush, you sense an audience. Ancestors whose faces dissolve in the mist, observers from eras without stories. You inhale, feeling their watchful presence, and realize that this place was a theater of memory, a gathering where knowledge passed not by scroll or speech, but by shared witnessing of ritual, movement, and songless communion. You sit cross-legged, on the rock, closing your eyes to summon the ritual in your mind. You sway gently, letting gestures rise from deep within, raising an open hand to sky, bowing to the earth, tracing arcs in the air that mirror the pillars' arrangement. In each movement, you feel the transmission of meaning, an embodied language that predates letters. The grove responds, mist swirls in swaths around you, branches bend as if applauding, and the basin's water ripples in time with your breath. When you finish, the silence deepens into a presence that fills your chest with gentle longing. You rise and wander to the grove's edge where a cluster of wildflowers thrives despite rocky soil. You pluck a single bloom, a delicate white star, and hold it to your lips, tasting its sweetness like memory's afterglow. You plant the bloom at the foot of a pillar, a living testament that remembrance endures even as eras pass. Beyond the flowers lies a narrow creek, its water singing over stones polished smooth by time. You follow its course upstream, listening to the liquid murmurs that carry stories older than any epic. You dip your fingers into the cool flow and let the water slip through your hands, each droplet a drop of forgotten saga, shimmering and elusive. You taste the creek's voice on your tongue, a silent narrative of glacial melt, mountain storms, and the simple persistence of life. Further on, you discover a circle of stones set flush in the bank. No doorway, only an entrance of awareness. Within the circle's embrace, the world seems to slow. Your heartbeat, the creek's rush, the breeze's sigh, each pulse extended into eternity. You close your eyes and lean forward, letting your forehead rest on the lip of one stone. There, you feel a vibration, low and constant, as if the earth itself remembers its first thoughts. You breathe in unison, mind dissolving into primal memory. When you open your eyes, The grove is suffused with dawn's gold. You walk back along the creek, retracing your steps through the amphitheatre, past pillars and the rain basin. At each landmark, you pause, touching stone, earth, water, collecting impressions that form a silent lexicon in your mind. These impressions will guide you in telling stories not of words, but of experience, of gestures, echoes, and the pulse of places. Reaching the grove's mouth, you turn for one final look. The pillars stand tall, the basin glitters with petals, the amphitheatre awaits its next witness. You understand that memory persists not in text, but in places that hold us, in grace. You step into the path that leads back to the world of words, carrying within you the grove's quiet teachings, that sometimes the deepest truths speak only in silence, and the oldest stories live not on pages, but in the beat of a heart attuned to the earth. You leave the grove behind, but its memory follows you, an unspoken guide in every step you take. You wander beyond the last known ruin, stepping off a beaten track into scrub and stone. Here, the land feels older, unearthed by wind and forgotten by time. The horizon stretches in muted hues of ochre and grey, with no sign of paths or markers. Yet you sense a presence in the silence, an invitation to tread lightly where curiosity might destroy more than it reveals. As you round a cragged outcrop, you glimpse an opening in the sandstone face, a fissure barely wider than a man's shoulders. No gate bars the way, no sign warns of danger. You pause, noting the smooth edges worn by centuries of breath and brush. In that moment, you understand. Some thresholds exist for those who choose to see without touching. You step inside. The passage slopes downward into darkness lit only by slits of daylight far above. The walls bear no carvings, only natural undulations that form shapes familiar and strange, a bird's beak, a reclining figure, a pair of clasped hands. In the gloom, each form seems alive, beckoning but refusing to yield its story. You breathe softly, letting your presence settle rather than demand entry. Halfway through the tunnel, you enter a cavern suffused with luminescent moss. Its pale green glow reveals a pool of water so still it mirrors the rocky ceiling. No footprint mars the floor, no artifact lies at the edge. You kneel to touch the water, its surface ripples at your fingertips, then smooths again, erasing evidence of your touch. The reflection shows not your face, but shifting patterns of veined stone. You realize the cavern records only what it chooses to remember. Leaving the pool, you follow a narrow ledge that skirts a chasm impossibly deep. A single torch bracket, empty, yet still warm to the touch, stands along the wall. You remove your lantern and place it beside the torch, as if offering shared light. For a moment, you feel witnessed by something unseen, an echo of footsteps that passed here long ago, unhurried and reverent. Then the torch's metal grows cold in your hand, and you move on. The passage opens onto a small alcove where wind-etched patterns fill the walls. Concentric ripples, meandering lines like rivers, clusters of pinpricks like stars. No reader can translate these formations. They predate even symbolic thought. You run your palm along the wall, feeling the ebb and flow of memory itself encoded in stone. Here lies knowledge too vast for words, stored in the geometry of rock. And the motion of passing air. Ahead, a set of stone steps winds upward. No railing, no sign of recent use. You climb, careful to avoid loose stones, till you emerge into a chamber of translucent quartz. Light from fissures above filters through the crystals, casting prisms of color across rough walls. The chamber hums with an energy you cannot name, neither electric nor organic, but a vibration that resonates in your skull. You close your eyes, letting the hum integrate with your blood's pulse. In the chamber's center rests a simple seat carved of milky quartz. You sit, legs folding as naturally as if born to this place. The crystals around you glow brighter, and you sense a dialogue, a slow exchange between you and the labyrinth of stone. No words pass between you, only subtle shifts, a flicker of light here, a warming of crystals there. You offer your intention to learn, and the place responds by granting understanding beyond comprehension. After a time measured less by minutes than by heartbeats, you stand and descend a different stairway, noting how the hum lingers at your back. The tunnel narrows until you must squeeze through on hands and knees, emerging into a final niche where a single, unpolished stone rests on a pedestal of rough-hewn rock. The stone is smooth, egg-shaped and warm, as though cradling a living ember. You lift it and feel a rush of inhaled breath. Memories of lands you have never seen, of names you have never spoken, and of futures you have not yet lived. You place the stone back, reverent, as if returning a borrowed fragment. The niche's walls pulse one last time with phosphorescent moss before fading to black. You turn toward the exit, guided by fading light and a quiet certainty that some secrets are meant to be touched only by the soul, not catalogued by the mind. Emerging into daylight, you inhale the open air, tasting freedom and relief. The fissure seals behind you in silence, the sandstone shifting just enough to erase your passing. No trace remains of your journey. No footprints, no torch bracket, no fallen moss. Only the memory in your veins carries the weight of what you have witnessed. You walk back across the scrubland toward familiar ruins, each step lighter for having learned restraint. In the wide, dusky sky above, a single star appears, bright against the coming night. You lift your hand in silent greeting, as if saying, "I have seen what you guard." At the edge of the last ruin, you pause to look back. The fissure's face is blank stone once more, unchanged by your passage. You realize that some places exist not to be entered, but to remain eternal invitations, thresholds of remembrance that await seekers humble enough to leave them untouched. You turn and continue on your path, carrying in your chest the echoes of a world that remembers itself without words. In your pocket lies no token, for the true treasure was given not in an object, but in the gentle knowing that some mysteries choose to remain hidden, sustaining their power in silent accord with the earth. The mystery remains, and so do you in the quiet. Perhaps some wonders are destined to stay just beyond our reach, their secrets preserved in silence rather than speech. May your dreams carry these echoes gently, and may you always walk softly when mystery beckons.